Hello, curious minds, and welcome to Documentary for Sleep. If you've arrived here tonight, maybe your thoughts are still wandering, or maybe you're just looking for a calm story to carry you toward rest. Either way, you're not alone. You're among fellow sapiens. Whether you're lying in bed, listening softly while cooking, or keeping this on in the background as you work through the quiet hours, this is your moment to slow down and travel back in time. Tonight, we'll explore one of the most defining shifts in our evolutionary story: walking on two legs. Most mammals move on four, yet we chose a different path. Why? Was it to free our hands for tools, to carry food and children, to see farther across the grasslands, or to save energy under the harsh sun? The answer is not simple, but the question itself opens a doorway into who we are. We don't claim to have every answer. What we do have are the fossils, the bones, and the scientific clues that help us piece together the story. And if you drift off as we wander through it, that's perfectly fine. This is a safe space for resting minds. I've left timestamps in the description so you can return tomorrow and pick up right where you left off, because this story is worth hearing in full. And if you enjoy this kind of gentle, long-form storytelling, soft science for curious sapiens, consider liking and subscribing. It helps this quiet little corner of the internet reach others who might need the same calm way of learning. I'd also love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Are you lying in bed or passing time on a night shift somewhere far away? And as always, stay curious, stay calm. Millions of years ago, in the dappled light of an East African forest, a world existed high above the ground. Here, in the endless green canopy, our ancient ape ancestors swung from branch to branch. There were no laws here, no religions, no codified concepts of morality. Life was a daily negotiation with gravity and danger. Yet, within this intricate arboreal society, a profound question quietly took root. Could the very first whispers of altruism, the faint blueprints of our conscience, have been forged not on the solid ground of principle, but in the precarious, swaying cradle of the trees? Life in the canopy was a masterclass in interdependence. To move through this three-dimensional maze required an exquisite coordination of hand and eye, a precise calculation of risk and distance. A missed leap was not merely a failure, it was a final one. This physical challenge nurtured a specific kind of intelligence, but the social world was even more complex. Survival depended on the group, a small, tightly knit band of individuals. In such an intimate setting, the ability to recognize a face, to remember a past favor, or to anticipate a rival's move became paramount. The brain began to wire itself for social nuance, building the very foundation upon which ethical judgment would later stand. It was here, in the constant, watchful presence of others, that the first social contracts were written, not in words, but in actions. The fossil record offers silent testimony to this transitional life. The bones of Australopithecus, a creature poised between two worlds, still bear the telltale signs of a climber. Long, curved fingers perfect for gripping branches, and shoulder joints built for swinging. They lived a life of in-between, one foot in the forest and one on the emerging savanna. In their small, gelled communities, a simple act like sharing a found trove of fruit, or a sharp, urgent cry to warn of a lurking predator, carried immense weight. These actions, which granted a survival advantage to the group, can be seen as a kind of primal morality, a practical ethics where goodness was synonymous with what was good for us. The echo of this ancient need for belonging still resonates within us today. Our modern obsession with reputation, our deep-seated fear of social exclusion, feels less like a cultural construct and more like an ancient, hardwired imperative. To be kind, to be fair, was to be kept within the safety of the tribe. But this presents a haunting paradox. Was this nascent cooperation truly moral, or was it merely a brilliant, coldly calculated strategy for survival? When one ape groomed another, was it an act of genuine affection, or a down payment on a future debt, hoping the favor would be returned when they themselves were hungry or vulnerable? Can a behavior born of mutual need ever be considered selfless? The line between community and commerce, between love and logistics becomes blurry in the forest shadows. The cradle of the trees may have nurtured our first good deeds, but did it also rock to sleep our capacity for pure, unconditional virtue? This intricate web of social dependence, woven high among the branches, faced its ultimate test not in the canopy, but far below. What immense pressure, what shifting force of the world could possibly compel a creature of such exquisite arboreal adaptation to relinquish its safety and descend to the unknown dangers of the ground? What happens when the tribe, once a closed circle of familiar faces, suddenly encounters the terrifying and alien other? The forest canopy was a cradle. For millions of years it offered a world of abundance and safety, a three-dimensional maze where the quickest path was a swinging arm, not a trudging step. Up there, the rules were simple. Find fruit, avoid leopards, hold on tight. So why would any ape, secure in its arboreal kingdom, ever choose to relinquish that grip and step down onto the unknown, dangerous ground? This was not a preordained march toward humanity. It was a gamble, a desperate pivot forced by a changing world. And the stakes were not just survival, but the very first, tentative stirrings of a new way of seeing the horizon, and eventually, of seeing each other. This descent was not a single event, but a slow, reluctant migration. The world itself was shifting. Climates were drying, vast swathes of forest thinning into mosaics of woodlands and open savanna. The endless buffet of the canopy was fracturing, its fruits now scattered islands in a sea of grass. To move between them, our ancestors had to cross the gaps, and on the ground, a new posture offered a crucial advantage. Bipedalism, walking upright, was far more than a change in gait. It was a radical re-engineering of the body that freed the hands for carrying food or tools. But perhaps more profoundly, it lifted the eyes. It granted a new perspective, literally raising our ancestors above the tall grasses to spot distant resources and looming predators. This vertical view transformed the world from an immediate, close-range scramble into a landscape of possibilities and threats, a map waiting to be read. Did this new, broader horizon also plant the seed for a broader mind, one that could begin to plan, to anticipate, and to wonder? The fossil record whispers this story of gradual transformation. The hauntingly familiar footprints at Laetoli, preserved in volcanic ash, tell a tale not of clumsy stumble but of a confident, purposeful stride. Australopithecus afarensis, the creature who made them, was a creature of two worlds, still bearing the anatomy for climbing, but fully committed to the earth. Life on the ground demanded a new social contract. The solitary foraging of the forest was insufficient here. Hunting elusive game, defending against new predators, required coordination. Food, especially large kills, became a communal resource to be shared, defended, and bargained over. The community was no longer just a family. It was now a society of non-kin, a fragile alliance built on the necessity of cooperation. In this new pressure cooker of social living, did the first notions of fairness and reciprocity emerge from the tension between what one desired for oneself and what the group required to survive? This ancient pivot echoes strangely in our modern lives. We now live in concrete canyons instead of wooded ones, surrounded not by familiar troopmates, but by a constant stream of strangers, a situation utterly foreign to our tree-dwelling cousins. Our complex moral codes, our laws and social norms, are the evolved protocols that allow this unprecedented experiment to function. They are the rules for sharing the metaphorical meat on the savannah of a city bus, a corporate office, or an online forum. They are the necessary glue for a species that chose to live too close together. But was this glue always benevolent? Or did the very proximity that forced cooperation also breed new, more sophisticated vices? The same social density that allowed for collective hunting also created the perfect conditions for deception, for free riders who took but did not contribute, for the jealous guarding of status and mates. If cooperation was the cradle of morality, was competition the forge of hypocrisy? So we are left with a paradox written in bone and behavior. The descent from the trees forced us to stand, to see further, and to rely on one another in ways we never had before. It pulled us out of the isolated self and into the collective. But did this journey make us inherently better, or simply more complex? If standing up allowed us to see the distant storm on the horizon, did it also force us to keep a closer, more wary watch on the person standing next to us? We began to look out, together, at the world. But at what precise moment did we start looking inward, at each other, and begin the endless, fraught work of judgment? Perhaps the first answer lies not in a theory, but in a trail of footsteps. What do the oldest fossil footprints, pressed into ancient mud, reveal about the moment we truly stood up? The air in Latoli, Tanzania is dry and heavy with the dust of ages. But 3.6 million years ago, this same earth was soft, a fresh layer of volcanic ash dampened by a passing rain. It was a moment of perfect, fleeting preservation. Into this soft plaster, two figures walked. Their paths, pressed side by side into the ground, tell a silent, staggering story. One set of prints is larger, the other noticeably smaller. They are not running. They are not foraging. They are walking, together, across a landscape teeming with unseen dangers. The larger prints occasionally blur at the edges, as if the individual paused, adjusted their weight, and waited. The smaller prints sometimes fall precisely within the footsteps of the larger, a small creature walking in the literal footsteps of its guide. Was this the first chapter of our story? Not the first step, but the first shared journey. A moment where walking became more than locomotion. It became an act of care. To stand upright is a biological revolution. It demands a complete reordering of the body. The pelvis, that cradle of life, must narrow and reshape itself into a basin to support our heavy vertical organs. The spine curves into a graceful, shock-absorbing S. This monumental shift came at a cost. Back pain, the peril of childbirth, a center of gravity that makes a simple fall a potential catastrophe. Yet, the payoff was a world remade. Our hands were freed. No longer required for locomotion, they evolved into instruments of exquisite sensitivity. They could now grasp a tool, yes, but also cradle an infant, tend a wound, or offer a steadying touch. The fist that could fashion a club was the same hand that could gently stroke a face. Does our capacity for compassion, then, have its deepest roots, not in our brains, but in the architecture of our hips? Was morality born from a simple biomechanical fact, the liberation of the embrace? The Laetoli footprints are more than a record of gait. They are a fossilized moment of behavior. They capture not just that they walked, but how. They did not move as isolated individuals, each on their own frantic search for survival. They moved as a pair, their paths intertwined. The proximity of the prints suggests a social bond, a shared pace, a mutual awareness. The smaller individual, perhaps a child, stepping into the safer, compacted footprints of the adult implies protection and guidance. This is not merely bipedalism. It is companionship fossilized. Could it be that our first moral impulse was not a complex philosophical concept, but this simple physical act? The decision to slow down, to walk alongside another, to ensure they too cross the dangerous open ground? Did morality begin not with a law, but with a footprint? We see this ancient echo every day on a busy city street. A parent reaches down and a small hand instinctively grasps theirs. One person offers an arm to an elder crossing a slick intersection. We do not need to be taught the symbolism of this act. We feel it in our bones. To walk with someone is to say, "Your path is my path. Your safety is my concern." It is a universal, wordless language of solidarity that transcends culture and era. Is this profound, simple gesture a cultural invention, or is it something deeper, a behavioral fossil we all carry within us, a genetic memory of two figures walking across the African plains? Yet we must pause. Are we, from our complex human perch, guilty of romanticizing a shadow in the stone? The skeptic in us whispers a colder truth. Perhaps the two hominins were merely walking the same path minutes or hours apart, their togetherness a cruel trick of geology. Perhaps the smaller was not a child, but a smaller adult, and the overlapping steps were a coincidence of pathfinding, not care. Can we ever be certain that the motivation behind those steps was concern and not simple, blind instinct? The stone gives us the action, but it keeps the intention locked away forever. Does our need to find meaning in these echoes say more about them or about us? So what do these ancient footprints truly tell us? They tell us that we stood up, and in doing so, we opened our arms. They suggest that our journey toward humanity was never a solitary sprint, but a walk taken together. The evidence is there, not in a grand declaration, but in the quiet, parallel paths pressed into volcanic ash. To understand the origin of our ethics, perhaps we must look not just at the footprints themselves, but at the direction they were heading, toward a future built not on individual strength, but on collective care. If walking upright was the first step, was choosing to walk with another the second? And if this upright posture was the foundation for it all, we are left to wonder, was this great anatomical shift a brilliant evolutionary advantage, or merely a precarious accident that we, against all odds, managed to turn into a virtue? The human spine is a precarious tower of bone and cartilage, a structure that seems almost defiantly ill-suited for its task. It stacks vertebra upon vertebra like a column of precarious stones, each disc a fragile cushion against the relentless pull of gravity. This design invites a lifetime of complaints: the dull, persistent ache in the lower back after a long day, the sharp, electric shock of a slipped disc, the slow, grinding decay of arthritis. It is an architecture of compromise, a testament to an evolutionary gamble that left us both empowered and vulnerable. Yet, this very same flawed column is what allows us to rise, to stand on our own 2 feet, to face the world and each other, eye to eye. Does our morality, our very sense of right and wrong, begin not with a thought, but with an act of physical defiance? Does ethics start the moment we stood up? From a purely engineering standpoint, the spine is a marvel of adaptive, if imperfect, design. It is a relic of a quadrupedal past, forcibly repurposed for a vertical existence. The graceful S-curve is our body's ingenious solution to a problem of its own making, a shock-absorbing system that allows us to walk and run without jolting our brains with every step. But the cost of this innovation is high. The lower back, the lumbar region, bears the immense weight of our upright torsos, a constant pressure that our ancestors, moving on all fours, never had to endure. The vertebrae, once aligned for a horizontal spine, are now stacked, making the discs between them susceptible to bulges and ruptures. It is a system that works, but just barely, and its failures are written into the fabric of our daily discomfort. We are a species perpetually one wrong move away from being reminded of our biomechanical fragility. But what if this fragility is the very price of our humanity? The shift to bipedalism was more than a change in locomotion. It was a liberation of the senses and the hands, and it fundamentally rewired our social world. When our ancestors rose from the forest floor and the savanna grass, their world shifted from a horizontal plane to a vertical one. Most crucially, they began to interact face to face. This was a biological and social revolution. The direct frontal engagement forced a new intensity of interaction. We could now see the subtle flicker of emotion across a face, the slight narrowing of the eyes in suspicion, the gentle crinkling that signals a smile. This constant, intimate visual feedback loop likely supercharged the development of the brain's mirror neuron system and the neural pathways dedicated to processing emotion, gaze, and facial expression. Empathy, it seems, may have its roots in this new way of seeing. To look directly into the eyes of another is to be presented with an unavoidable window into their inner state. It is the biological foundation for recognizing pain, joy, and fear in another, the first raw material of compassion and perhaps a nascent conscience. Was our capacity for care forged in the furnace of this new, confronting intimacy? The archaeological record offers a hauntingly beautiful testament to this emerging capacity. Deep in the fossil beds, we find evidence that speaks not of survival of the fittest, but of care for the most vulnerable. The skeleton of an elderly Homo erectus individual, bones gnarled with severe arthritis and deformities that would have made walking and foraging difficult impossible, yet who lived for years in that debilitated state. They did not perish quickly. They were fed, protected, and brought water. They were kept within the safety of the group. This is more than pity. It is a profound cognitive leap. It signifies an understanding that the value of an individual extends beyond their immediate physical utility, a recognition of a shared fate and a debt to the past. The spine that failed this individual was the same evolutionary adaptation that, by freeing the hands of their kin, allowed for the sharing of food and the offering of support. The very structure that causes us pain also enabled the first acts of tenderness that defied that pain. Does the shadow of our shared suffering, made possible by our upright posture, form the deepest bedrock of social morality? This ancient physical legacy is woven into the very language of our modern ethics. Our vocabulary of virtue is saturated with the geometry of uprightness. We stand up for what is right. We are upstanding citizens. We have backbone when we show courage and spineless when we show cowardice. A principled person is straightforward and on the level, while a deceitful one is crooked or underhanded. We speak of facing a problem or turning our back on it. This is not mere metaphor. It is a cultural echo of a deep evolutionary truth. The physical posture of confronting the world directly, openly, and without evasion has become the symbolic posture of moral integrity. The body's alignment has become a proxy for the soul's. Has our biology, over millennia, quietly authored the script for our morality? Yet, a critical voice whispers a necessary counter-argument. Is this all a seductive illusion? A case of us constructing a grand narrative to fit our physical form? After all, a symbol is not the thing itself. To stand up for justice is a powerful image, but the moral choice resides in the mind and the will, not in the curvature of the lumbar spine. We can make the most righteous choice while sitting down. We can display profound cowardice while standing tall. History is filled with tyrants who stood erect and gave commanding speeches, their posture perfect, their morals bankrupt. The act of standing is a posture, a presentation. True ethics must be an internal compass, a series of conscious choices made in the silent, private theater of the mind, utterly divorced from the body's architecture. Could it be that we have simply projected our abstract ideals onto the most readily available physical template, our own vertical selves, mistaking the map for the territory? So, if the moral choice is not in the stance itself, then where did it come from? What was the catalyst within our new form that made the choice for compassion not just possible, but necessary? The spine may have set the stage, but what then emerged from the wings to play the part? The liberation of our hands allowed for tool use, yes, but also for the gentle touch, the caress, the act of giving. The face-to-face interaction sharpened our empathy, but it also required new levels of communication, cooperation, and trust to survive. Our big brains, demanding vast amounts of energy, made us reliant on shared resources and collective child-rearing, forging bonds that made abandonment a threat to the whole group's survival. Perhaps the answer lies not in a single part, but in the entire interconnected system that bipedalism set in motion, a cascade of biological and social consequences that made caring for one another an evolutionary advantage as critical as any claw or fang. The spine, for all its flaws, was the first domino to fall. It initiated a sequence that transformed us from mere creatures into something else entirely, beings who could choose to be moral. We are left, then, not with an answer, but with a deeper, more intimate question. If our upright body was the crucible, then what was the alchemy that turned its limitations into our loftiest ideals? What precise alchemy of bone, brain, and beating heart transmuted the simple act of standing into the profound courage of compassion? And if the spine was the price of entry, What was the cost of its final defining adjustment? When the last vestige of our past, the tail, receded into a fused remnant at the base of this new column, what delicate equilibrium was lost? What new vulnerability did we gain in our relentless pursuit of standing tall? We once had tails. This is not a metaphor for our lost connection to nature or a simpler past. It is a stark, biological fact etched into our embryonic development and fossil record. For our distant ancestors, that tail was a vital instrument of balance, a counterweight swinging through the arboreal world. Then, it was gone. Its disappearance was not a simple subtraction, but a seismic shift that forced the entire architecture of the body to recalibrate. The physical center of gravity had been lost. What emerged from that void was a new internalized system of equilibrium, a delicate dance of bone, muscle, and nerve that allowed a precarious ape to stand upright and claim the horizon. But did something else, something less tangible, also emerge from that emptiness? As the body learned to balance itself from within, did the human mind, in its sprawling social world, conjure its own counterweight, a thing we now call morality? The genetic story of our lost tail is written in a brief, almost mundane error. A single gene mutation, a stray sequence of DNA known as an ALU element, inserted itself into the TBXT gene. This genetic stutter effectively canceled the instruction to grow a substantial tail. This was not a slow withering away, but a sudden, profound off-switch. The immediate physical consequences were revolutionary. Without a tail to act as a rudder or a counterbalance, the entire skeletal structure had to rebel against its own design. The spine, no longer anchored and leveraged from behind, was forced to curve into a gentle S shape, a shock-absorbing spring to bear the vertical load of the head and torso. The pelvis, once narrow and suited for a quadrupedal gait, broadened and bowl-shaped, cradling our new upright organs and providing a new anchor for powerful gluteal muscles. Every step became a controlled fall, a momentary loss of balance caught and corrected by a complex symphony of muscles in the back, abdomen, and legs. This was the body's first great negotiation with gravity, a hard-won treaty written in the language of bone and sinew. Yet the most profound adaptation may have occurred not in the skeleton, but in the command center above. Balancing on 2 feet is an astronomically complex computational task. The brain had to evolve new systems to process a constant, torrential stream of data from the inner ear, the eyes, and proprioceptive nerves in the joints. The cerebellum, the region responsible for motor control and coordination, expanded and refined its circuits. But perhaps more significantly, this new demand for constant, unconscious self-monitoring and adjustment may have paved the neural pathways for something far grander: the ability to self-regulate behavior. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, impulse control, and foresight, developed in tandem with these physical demands. To walk upright is to constantly choose stability over chaos, to resist the primal urge to simply fall forward. It is a quiet, perpetual act of will. Could this internal governance of the body's motion have been the biological cradle for the governance of the self? If the body must learn to resist physical entropy, could the mind have learned to resist social and moral entropy, laying the foundational circuitry for empathy, reciprocity, and shame? The archaeological record offers a silent testament to this great rebalancing. Consider Homo erectus, the pioneer. Their fossils show a creature fully committed to the ground, with a body built for endurance, running, and walking. This was a freedom unlocked by stability. With their hands permanently liberated, they could craft more complex tools, carry resources over vast distances, and coordinate hunts. Their gait was no longer a scrambling struggle but a confident, efficient stride. This stable physical presence in the world fundamentally altered social dynamics. A group could move together with purpose, their movements predictable, their intentions readable. Trust is, at its most basic level, a prediction of another's behavior. When your fellow hunter is not liable to stumble unpredictably, your coordination can become more sophisticated. The stable body became a platform for stable relationships. the shared pursuit of a large prey animal, the division of labor, the carrying of food back to a home base. All these early facets of culture are built upon a bedrock of physical predictability. Did the rhythmic, synchronized walking of a hunter-gatherer band create the first rhythm of social contract, a shared understanding that the group's survival depended on each individual maintaining their balance, both literally and figuratively? This deep-seated link between physical and moral equilibrium is woven into the very fabric of our modern language and intuition. We speak of a balanced individual, of someone who has lost their balance or is morally unsteady. We describe a grievous wrong as a weighty matter and seek equilibrium in times of stress. A person who acts without ethics is ungrounded, unhinged, or off-kilter, a danger to the social organism because their actions are as unpredictable and damaging as a physical fall. Our justice systems, in their ideal form, are not about punishment, but about restoration, the restoration of a balance that has been upset. This is not merely a convenient metaphor. It feels true in our bones because perhaps it originated there. The profound effort it takes to keep our bodies upright against the constant pull of gravity is the original struggle, a daily practice in maintaining order against chaos. Is it any wonder that we project this same struggle onto our social and moral universe, seeking a center that will hold? Yet, a nagging doubt persists. Is this elegant connection between a lost tale and a found morality a profound truth, or is it just a pleasing story we tell ourselves? Are we simply pattern-seeking creatures desperate to find a physical origin for our metaphysical yearnings? Correlation is not causation. The expansion of the prefrontal cortex could be linked to social complexity, language, and tool use, with bipedalism merely being a coincidental prerequisite. Perhaps morality is not an emergent property of a balanced skeleton, but a purely cultural invention, a necessary tool for survival that we have mythologized with the language of the body. Does attributing our ethics to the shape of our pelvis diminish the beautiful, terrifying burden of free will? If our morality is just an extension of our biomechanics, are we truly choosing the good, or are we simply obeying a biological imperative written in the curve of our spine? The disappearance of the tail forced a biological revolution, an internal reckoning with balance that reshaped our very form. It was a loss that demanded a new kind of gain. So, if the body was compelled to find a new center of gravity without its ancestral rudder, could the human collective, sprawling, competitive, and brilliantly social, have faced a parallel imperative? As groups grew larger and interactions more complex, the old instincts of the troop were no longer sufficient. The social world became as precarious as walking on two legs. Could morality, that intricate system of taboos, virtues, and shared obligations, be humanity's own ingenious, internalized counterweight? It is the system we built to keep ourselves from falling, not into the mud, but into chaos. We learned to stand upright on the earth, and then we had to learn what to do with our hands. We learned to balance ourselves, and then we had to learn how to balance our actions. But if this new internal balance was the cradle of our humanity, it came with a price. Every evolutionary adaptation is a trade-off, a compromise. The very same pelvic structure that stabilized us for walking upright also narrowed the birth canal, turning the miracle of birth into a trial of survival for mother and child. So, did our greatest step forward also become our most painful trap? What profound cost did we unknowingly agree to pay for the privilege of standing tall? No other primate gives birth as we do. It is a tight, twisting, and often harrowing passage, a trial by biology that can last for hours and sometimes threatens life itself. For most creatures, birth is a swift, solitary event. For us, it is a profound and perilous collaboration. Yet this very biological paradox, this narrow gateway of pain, may have been the forge upon which some of our most human qualities were hammered out. The deep bonds of motherhood, the imperative of collective care, and perhaps the very stirrings of an ethic built on nurture. The story of this paradox is written in the architecture of our bones, in the cradle of the human pelvis. To walk upright is to be permanently off balance, a precarious tower of weight balanced on two slender points. Evolution's solution was to redesign our foundation, to tilt the pelvis inward and fashion it into a bowl that cradles our organs and supports our torso. This magnificent adaptation allowed us to stride across savannas, to run, to chase, to carry. But every design has its trade-off. The very reshaping that granted us the world narrowed the exit. The birth canal became a tight, knotted corridor, a labyrinth of bone through which a new life must make its fraught journey. And yet, the infant making this journey is, in a crucial sense, unfinished. Its head is already perilously large, a globe of soft bone and immense potential, barely squeezing through the maternal aperture. To wait any longer, to grow any larger within the womb, would make passage impossible. So we are born prematurely, compared to other primates. A newborn chimp, far more developed and mobile, clings to its mother's fur mere hours after birth. Our offspring arrive helpless, their skulls still soft and malleable, their years of development all ahead of them. They are exquisitely vulnerable, a bundle of unmet needs. This state of prolonged dependency is not a flaw, it is a feature. It demands an investment. It requires not just a mother, but a network. The infant's survival hinges on constant, attentive care, on being carried, fed, and protected for years. In that relentless demand, in that absolute reliance, did the first seeds of empathy take root? Did the need to understand a cry, to soothe a discomfort, to anticipate a hunger, force upon us a new depth of attention to another being? The fossil record offers a silent, bony testimony to this ancient struggle and its social solution. On the remains of female Homo erectus, our ancient ancestor who first walked fully upright, paleoanthropologists find clues etched in wear and tear. The physical stresses recorded in their spines and pelvises suggest a lifetime of carrying, not just their own weight, but the weight of others. More tellingly, the calculated dimensions of their birth canals imply that their infants would have been born in a similarly altricial, helpless state. This suggests that the challenge of birth and the consequent need for extended care is not a new development, but an ancient inheritance. And where there is helplessness, help often follows. It is almost impossible to imagine a hominin mother navigating the ordeal of a twisted breech birth alone. The very mechanics suggest a need for assistance, for hands to guide and support, for a presence that offers comfort and practical aid. This shifts birth from a solitary physiological event to a social one. The survival of the mother and the child becomes a collective interest. Does the fossilized wear on a 2-million-year-old bone, then, whisper the earliest stories of midwifery, of compassion, of a community's stake in its own future? This legacy of struggle and support echoes powerfully into our modern world. We have not out-evolved the fundamental constraints of our anatomy. Birth remains a potent nexus of risk and wonder, still requiring a web of support, now formalized into the vast medical and emotional infrastructure of obstetrics, doulas, and partners. But the physical trial has also been woven into the very fabric of our cultural and moral imagination. The pain of childbirth is not merely a biological signal. It is transformed into a story of sacrifice, a narrative of strength, a sacred passage. We have built entire ethical systems around the concept of the mother, of nurturing, of the profound debt owed to the one who endured. The physical ordeal becomes a cornerstone of love, a reason for devotion. We have, in a sense, taken a biological vulnerability and sanctified it, building our highest ideals upon our deepest frailties. But one must pause here and consider a more unsettling possibility. Is this narrative of sacred sacrifice a genuine moral elevation, or is it, in part, a beautiful rationalization, a way to make poetic and purposeful what is, at its core, a potentially lethal design flaw? Does calling it divine or heroic help us bear a burden that nature, in its blind evolutionary calculus, simply dumped upon us? The ethics of nurture that arose from this predicament are undeniably beautiful, the bonds unbreakably strong. But did they arise because of the flaw, or in spite of it? Are we celebrating a virtue or merely making a necessity into a virtue? This is not to diminish the profound reality of a mother's love, but to wonder at the strange alchemy that transforms raw biological pain into the gold of human connection. Perhaps then, the human story is not one of perfect design, but of brilliant, messy improvisation. Our pelvis is both a cradle for walking and a club of painful birth. It gave us the world but made entering it a trial, and our response was not to be defeated by this imperfection, but to build upon it. We used our free hands, the very hands that were freed by our upright gait, not just to carry tools, but to cradle the helpless infant that our bodies produced too soon. We used our large brains, the very brains that caused the problem, to devise knowledge, stories, and support, systems to solve it. We turned a tight squeeze into a tight embrace. So we gained the horizon. We stood upright and saw further across the grasslands than any ape ever had. But to what end? Was it merely to spot predators and prey? To see the next watering hole? Or was it also to see the coming storm in time to warn the others? To spot the distant figure of a returning hunter and feel the first flicker of relief? To gaze at the same starry expanse and together begin to weave the same story? Imagine a world seen only through a curtain of grass, a world of immediate threats and hidden rewards, where the horizon is a myth and the future is a concept that doesn't yet exist. For our distant ancestors, this was reality. Then, a shift, a slow, arduous ascent, a change in posture that did more than just free the hands. It fundamentally altered the mind's horizon. To stand upright was to see beyond the next blade of grass, to peer over the savanna, to watch a storm gather on the edge of the world. It was the first step in a journey, not just across a landscape, but through time itself. This new vantage point offered more than a better view of predators or prey. It offered a glimpse of consequence, of cause and effect playing out on a grander scale. And in that expansive view, in that new ability to forecast, might we find the very cradle of morality, not as a divine decree, but as a biological imperative born from the simple, profound act of seeing what comes next? When our ancestors rose onto their 2 feet, they did not merely gain a higher perspective on the land. They gained a higher perspective on time. The immediate claustrophobic world of the quadruped was replaced by a panoramic vista where events unfolded with a new narrative clarity. A lioness stalking her prey was no longer a sudden, terrifying explosion from the undergrowth, but a slow, deliberate drama observed from a safe distance. This shift from reactive to predictive was a cognitive revolution. The brain, now tasked with processing a vastly more complex visual field, began to rewire itself. The visual cortex expanded, mapping the world in greater detail. But more importantly, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of planning, social reasoning, and impulse control, was called into new service. It began to function as a temporal projector, running simulations of the future based on the patterns observed from that new commanding height. Could it be that this neural hardware, initially built for literal foresight, became the very platform for figurative foresight, the ability to anticipate the emotional and social consequences of our actions? The evidence for this deep connection between vision, foresight, and sociality is etched not just in our genes, but in the very stone our ancestors left behind. Consider the Acheulean hand axe, a teardrop-shaped tool of stunning symmetry and complexity that appeared over 1 million years ago. Its creation was no impulsive act. It required a vision, a mental blueprint of the finished product held in the mind of the toolmaker long before the first flake was struck from the core. This is foresight materialized. It represents a sacrifice of the present moment, hours of painstaking, deliberate labor invested for a future payoff of a more efficient butchering tool. This is the core of a moral principle, the delay of gratification for a greater, later good. The cognitive muscles flexed in planning a tool, envisioning an outcome, understanding. The necessary steps, resisting the urge to abandon the tedious task, are the very same muscles required for social cohesion. To plan a tool is to understand cause and effect in stone. To plan a social action is to understand cause and effect in a community. Is a shared expectation of future behavior, a social contract etched not in stone but in custom, not the most sophisticated tool we ever devised? Our modern world is a testament to this elongated perspective. Our entire civilization is built upon a web of long-term moral and legal systems designed to curb our short-term impulses. Laws, religions, and ethical codes are all collective exercises in foresight. They are predictions. "Thou shalt not steal" is not merely a command. It is a societal prediction that, if stealing becomes commonplace, the fabric of trust and cooperation unravels, leading to a future where everyone is poorer. This complex moral reasoning is, at its heart, a highly advanced form of the same predictive calculation that began on the savannah. It is the ability to model multiple potential futures and choose the path that leads to the most stable, prosperous outcome for the group. We are constantly running invisible simulations, asking ourselves not just what will happen if I do this, but how will she feel if I do this, and what will our relationship become over time? Has our morality simply evolved as the ultimate cognitive tool for navigating an intensely social world? Yet, a thorny question persists, lurking at the edge of this grand narrative. If this long-term thinking is the bedrock of morality, is it truly selfless virtue, or is it merely the pinnacle of a shrewd survival strategy? Is the golden rule, to treat others as you wish to be treated, a genuine empathetic leap, or is it a brilliant, calculated risk assessment, a way of ensuring our own future security by investing in the goodwill of others? This line of thinking suggests that our highest ideals might be rooted in a deep, evolutionary selfishness. We behave morally because it pays off in the long run, because it grants us membership in the protective tribe, because it builds a reputation that makes others more likely to cooperate with us. The same prefrontal cortex that allows us to feel guilt and compassion also allows for manipulation and social cunning. So, are we moral beings, or are we just very, very good at math? Does the origin of our goodness somehow diminish its value, or does the complex, calculated nature of it make it all the more remarkable? Perhaps the true transition from simple foresight to profound morality was not the act of seeing far, but the act of feeling deep. It was the moment the brain's powerful prediction engine was turned inward, toward the emotional landscape of others, to not only see that a lion attack would cause death, but to feel that a stolen meal would cause despair, to not only predict a physical outcome, but to simulate an internal, subjective experience in another mind. This is the quantum leap, the fusion of cognitive foresight with emotional intelligence. This empathic forecasting is the glue of morality. It transforms a calculated, "I shouldn't steal from him because he might retaliate later," into a more profound, "I shouldn't steal from him because I can imagine his hunger and his frustration." The first is a strategy. The second contains the seed of virtue, and this incredible journey, from scanning the horizon for storms to sensing the storms within another's heart, began with a simple change in posture. It began by standing up, and in doing so, freeing the tools that would let us build not just hand axes, but the very concept of a shared future. And it all began with the hands. Liberated from their duty as feet, they hung empty, poised at our sides. What world of possibility did that emptiness contain? What happens when an intelligent mind, already learning to see the future, is suddenly gifted with two perfect instruments to start shaping it? Imagine a moment suspended in the deep amber of prehistory. A hominid, not so different from us, stoops and their fingers close not around a fruit or a stick, but around a jagged piece of stone. This is not an act of immediate consumption or simple defense. It is an act of potential. The hand does not throw the rock. It turns it over, feeling its weight, its edges, its promise. In that quiet, earth-shattering instant, the rock ceases to be a part of the landscape and becomes an instrument of will. It is the first tool, and with it, humanity picks up not just a sharpened flint, but the immense, double-edged burden of choice. Was this the moment morality began? Not with a feeling, but with a function. The tool could cut meat, but also skin. It could crush bone, but also tenderize. It could be a weapon, but also a scalpel. For the first time, our ancestors held in their hands the physical power to alter the world with precision. But did the hand that learned to create come with a heart that knew restraint? This liberation of the hands was a biological revolution millions of years in the making. The slow, steady shift to bipedalism freed our ancestors' forelimbs from the sole duty of locomotion. This was no minor anatomical adjustment. It was a rewiring of destiny. With hands now available to manipulate, probe, and craft, the brain was suddenly unleashed from the constant, demanding chore of managing complex quadrupedal movement. Neurological resources were diverted, creating a surplus of cognitive capital. This energy flooded the burgeoning cortex, particularly the prefrontal region, the seat of executive function, of foresight, of impulse control. It is the brain's mediator, the internal voice that weighs desire against consequence, that can envision the future and plan the steps to get there. The same circuitry that allowed a hominid to visualize a cutting tool inside a nondescript stone, to see the future in the present, is also the circuitry that allows one to suppress the urge to strike in anger, to share food instead of hoarding it, to feel the faint, nascent prick of what we would later call conscience. Did our morality, then, first emerge not from a soul, but from a surplus of brain power? A mere side effect of having nothing better to do with our free hands and the new mental space they created? The archaeological record offers a silent, stony testimony to this dawn of intention. The oldest crafted tools are not crude clubs for bludgeoning, but surprisingly sophisticated hand axes and sharp flakes for butchering. Their creation required a cascade of cognitive leaps: the selection of the right raw material, the mental blueprint of the final product, the skilled application of force to fracture the stone in a predictable way, a process known as knapping. This is not the work of a solitary, selfish brute. It implies teaching, learning, and the sharing of technique across generations. It is a culture. And with culture comes protocol. A sharp flake is dangerously ambiguous. Its use must be negotiated. Was it for slicing the hide of a mammoth brought down by a coordinated hunt, a prize shared by the many? Or was it for a darker, more intimate purpose? Evidence from fossil bones shows cut marks that suggest butchery, but also, in rarer, more haunting cases, signs of defleshing that hint at practices we struggle to understand. The tool itself is neutral, but its existence forces the creation of the first rules, the genesis of tool morality. Who gets to use it? When is its power justified? The tool created a new form of social contract, one written not in words, but in action and consequence. Did the invention of the scalpel, in the same breath, invent the concept of the wound? This ancient dialogue between creation and conscience echoes violently into our modern age. We are the children of that first stone. In our hands, we hold the direct descendants of those early tools. A surgeon's laser is a refined hand axe, designed to heal with microscopic precision. A nuclear warhead is its grotesque amplification, capable of undoing creation itself. The tool's promise and its peril have scaled with terrifying symmetry. We debate endlessly the ethics of the gun, the algorithm, the gene-editing technology, as if the problem lies in the object. But the object is merely a mirror. It reflects back the entirety of the human condition, our compassion and our cruelty, our wisdom and our recklessness. The power to build and the power to destroy are two currents flowing from the same source. The hand that crafts a vaccine is the same hand that can weaponize a virus. We have mastered the tool, but have we mastered the intent behind it? We possess the dexterity of gods, but do we possess their wisdom? This leads us to a disquieting, counterintuitive possibility. Perhaps morality did not precede the tool as some innate, noble light within us. Perhaps it followed. Perhaps ethics is not the cause of our goodness, but the consequence of our power. It is the necessary set of brakes we invented for a vehicle that was already accelerating wildly downhill. It is the fence built at the edge of the cliff only after someone fell. The first moral codes, "Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal," read not like divine revelations, but like urgent user manuals for newly invented technologies of agriculture, property, and yes, weaponry. They are the social immune response to the pathogen of our own ingenuity. Our capacity to create had outstripped our innate instincts, and so we had to craft a new instinct, a cultural one, codified in law and legend. We created the tool, and the tool in turn forced us to create morality to manage its terrifying potential. So, was our first act of true humanity not creation, but the responsibility that creation demanded? If this is so, then the cradle of ethics may not have been a place of softness, but of sheer, sobering accountability. It began not with a feeling of pity for the weak, but with a cold, calculated recognition of the damage the strong could do. It was the dawning understanding that power is not a right, but a debt. The hand that holds the tool incurs a responsibility to all that the tool can touch. This is a concept that only a creature capable of both building a sanctuary and forging a shackle could ever comprehend. We are that creature, and so we are left standing there, millions of years later, that first rock still metaphorically in our hand, facing the same primordial question it posed. We have spent eons honing the edge, but have we honed the hand that guides it? And if the freedom of our hands taught us the weight of responsibility, what then did the need to walk back to the group, to share the food we carried, teach us about the bonds that truly hold us together? Imagine this: a lone Homo habilis ancestor, not yet fully human but no longer merely ape, emerges from the shimmering heat of the savannah. The air is thick with the scent of dust and blood. In their hands, not dragged by teeth or clutched in a single fist, but cradled carefully in two, is a prize, fresh meat. They do not stop to gorge themselves in solitary triumph. Instead, they turn and walk back towards the scattered trees and the waiting group. This simple act, walking home with free hands full of food, may be one of the most profound yet overlooked revolutions in our story. Did the shift to two legs not only change how we moved, but fundamentally rewrite the very rules of our social contract, planting the seed for a behavior that remains central to who we are, the act of sharing? For most of the animal kingdom, a meal is an immediate personal affair. A predator feasts where its prey falls, a race against rivals and scavengers. To walk away from that bounty, to willingly transport it across a distance, requires a body freed from the task of locomotion. Bipedalism provided that freedom. It was an anatomical liberation that turned our forelimbs from instruments of propulsion into tools of transport. This was not merely a matter of convenience, it was an evolutionary catalyst. With two hands available to carry, the potential for a new economy of food emerged. We could now gather more than we could immediately consume. We could take surplus from a place of plenty to a place of safety. This simple physical capability is thought to have triggered a deep-seated shift in our social wiring, a kind of primal sharing module. The individual who returned with food increased the survival odds not just for themselves, but for their offspring, their kin, and the wider group. It fostered interdependence, rewarding cooperation and strengthening social bonds. The act of carrying, therefore, might have been the physical precursor to the psychological concept of provisioning. Does our innate sense of community, then, find its roots not just in our minds, but in the very architecture of our upright skeleton? The whispers of this ancient behavior are etched into the very earth, waiting for us to listen. At Olduvai Gorge, the so-called cradle of mankind, the story is told not in grand monuments, but in scattered stone and shattered bone. Archaeologists have unearthed sites where animal bones, some from large game, are found concentrated in specific areas, far from where the animals were likely killed. These bones bear the unmistakable marks of stone tools, cut marks for stripping flesh, percussion fractures for extracting marrow. This is not the chaotic aftermath of a hyena's feast. It is a deliberate, almost systematic processing of resources. It suggests a central place, a home base of sorts, where food was brought, divided, and consumed. This is perhaps our first tangible evidence of that pivotal change, the transition from eating for one, on the spot, to eating for many, back at home. These stone circles and bone piles are the silent ruins of our first shared meals, the earliest prototypes of the family dinner table. What does it mean that some of the oldest evidence of our humanity is not a weapon, but a communal kitchen? This ancient impulse to transport and share sustenance echoes powerfully through the millennia, right into our modern lives. The after-work gathering at a pub, the family dinner fought for in busy schedules, the shared lunch break in an office. These are not just cultural quirks. They are the living legacy of that hominin walking back to the group. The food itself is almost secondary. The primary nourishment is social. It is where bonds are reinforced, gossip is exchanged, and alliances are formed. We call it networking, team building, or family time, but beneath the modern jargon lies a primal rhythm. We are a species that breaks bread together. This ritual, so fundamental to every human culture on Earth, required a simple yet profound enabling technology, 2 free hands and the stable posture to use them. Our entire social world, in a sense, was built upon the cargo capacity of our early ancestors. So the next time you carry groceries into your home or take a pizza to a friend's house, consider that you are performing a ritual millions of years in the making. Are our most sophisticated social traditions ultimately built upon the most basic of logistical advantages? Yet, to romanticize this act as pure, unadulterated altruism would be to ignore the complex calculus of evolution. Was this early sharing truly selfless, or was it, in the harsh arithmetic of survival, a shrewd investment? In a world of scarcity, bringing food back to the group could be a form of insurance. It established social credit. The individual who shared today might be the one who needed to be fed tomorrow after an unsuccessful hunt. It could have been a strategy for attracting mates, signaling prowess and the ability to provide. It strengthened the group, which in turn offered better protection for the individual. This is not to cheapen the act, but to deepen our understanding of it. The motivation may have been a tangled mix of empathy, reciprocity, and self-interest, a combination that proved incredibly successful. Does recognizing the potential selfishness within sharing make the act itself less noble, or does it reveal a more intricate and sustainable model of cooperation? The reason we can even entertain these questions, whether of altruism or investment, boils down to a single critical physical fact: the ability to carry. The entire sophisticated edifice of sharing, with all its moral and social complexities, rests on the foundation of bipedal locomotion. It required hands that were free, a posture that was stable, and a gait that was efficient enough to cover ground while bearing a valuable and perhaps heavy load. That first walk home was a triumph of biomechanics every bit as much as it was a triumph of social bonding. It was the moment our journey toward humanity became a collective one, literally fueled by our ability to carry our resources with us. The hands that once clutched branches for balance now cradled the future of their community. This profound shift from moving on 4 legs to balancing on 2 granted us the world. But at what cost? We traded the stable, 4-pointed anchor of our primate cousins for a precarious, towering height. We gained the world, but did we lose our balance? A child takes a tentative step, wobbles, and tumbles onto a soft carpet. A man, having celebrated too much, weaves an unsteady path home. These are the bookends of a learned skill, a biological marvel we perform without a second thought, the act of balancing on 2 feet. It is a precarious miracle, a constant unconscious negotiation with gravity that defines our species. We accepted a tremendous biological trade-off for the privilege of standing tall. The question that lingers, like a faint echo from our deepest past, is not just how we do it, but why we ever embarked on such a risky evolutionary path. Was the reward truly worth the inherent instability, the constant threat of a fall? From a purely biomechanical standpoint, bipedalism is an engineering nightmare. A four-legged creature possesses a wide, stable base of support. Its center of gravity is low and comfortably distributed between its limbs. It is a table, steadfast and hard to topple. A human, in contrast, is a tower. Our center of gravity is high, perched precariously above two relatively narrow points of contact with the Earth. The entire system is an intricate, high-stakes ballet. It demands a symphony of sensory input and muscular response. The vestibular system in our inner ear acts as a gyroscope, a fluid-filled chamber reporting the slightest tilt of the head. Our eyes provide a horizon line, a visual anchor in a spinning world. Proprioceptors in our muscles and joints constantly whisper to the brain, detailing the exact position of every limb in space. This torrent of data is processed in a split second, and commands are fired back. A subtle tightening of the calf muscle here, a minor adjustment in the hip there. It is an immense neurological expenditure for something we consider automatic. The payoff, however, is efficiency. While a chimpanzee's knuckle-walking gait is powerful for short bursts, it is an energy-guzzling rocking motion. The human stride, with its pendulum-like swing of the legs and the spring-loaded arch of the foot, is a model of endurance. It is the difference between a sprint and a marathon. Our ancestors traded the stable, energy-intensive crawl for the unstable, energy-efficient walk. They gambled security for range. Does this mean our defining trait was born not from a desire to reach the stars, but simply to walk farther for lunch? The evidence for this ancient gamble is etched in stone. In Litoli, Tanzania, a light volcanic ash fell over the landscape 3.6 million years ago. Light rain followed, turning the ash to a soft plaster. Across this damp canvas, 3 individuals walked, 2 perhaps side by side, one following in the steps of another. Then the sun baked their passage into immortality. Their footprints are not the clumsy experimental marks of a creature just learning to stand. They reveal a confident, heel-to-toe gait, a rolling stride that is unmistakably, undeniably human. The maker of these prints, Australopithecus afarensis, was not yet us. Their brain was small, their frame still adapted for life in the trees. But their feet were ours. This fossilized moment captures the precise instant where evolution's gamble paid off. They were not just walking, they were striding into a new ecological niche. Standing upright freed their hands, allowing for the carrying of food, tools, or infants. It raised their eyes to the horizon, allowing them to see over tall grasses to spot predators or prey from a distance. The Litoli footprints are a silent testament to a calculated risk. They are the first receipt for a purchase we are still paying off, the down payment on the world. What does it say about us that our first lasting mark on this planet was not a tool, not a weapon, but a trail of footsteps? This ancient physical balancing act has seeped into the very core of our modern consciousness. We have internalized the metaphor. We speak of keeping our balance during a stressful week, of a well-balanced individual, of a life that feels off-kilter. We seek emotional equilibrium, psychological stability, and financial security. The fear of falling, socially, professionally, personally, is a primal anxiety. Our entire culture, in a way, is a vast collective effort to maintain an upright position on a shifting social terrain. The toddler's struggle to walk is our own lifelong struggle. We are forever that child, arms outstretched, wobbling, fighting gravity in 1,000 different forms. We built railings and invented rules, all to create the illusion of the stability our bodies inherently lack. Could it be that our deepest drive for control over our environment, our destinies, our emotions, stems from the simple, terrifying fact that we are perpetually one misstep away from a fall? Yet, there is a compelling counter-narrative to this story of triumphant choice. Perhaps our ancestors did not boldly choose to stand up. Perhaps they were forced. As the lush forests of Africa began to recede, giving way to open savannas, the world became wider, drier, and more dangerous. The distance between groves of life-saving trees grew. In this new, exposed landscape, the ability to move efficiently between scattered resources, to see across the grasses, became a matter of survival. Bipedalism may not have been a brilliant strategy so much as a desperate adaptation. It was the least bad option in a changing world. The individuals who could walk farther on less energy lived. Those who clung to the old ways of the forest did not. If this is true, then our proudest feature, the very foundation of our humanity, was born not of ambition, but of contingency. Are we, then, not the architects of our own destiny, but the heirs to an ancient compromise, the children of a forced hand? Regardless of the initial spark, whether it was opportunity or necessity, the consequences were irreversible and profound. The act of balancing on 2 feet was not an end in itself. It was a gateway. From that unstable platform, a new world of possibilities unfolded. With hands now free, we could manipulate objects with growing sophistication. We could carry, and therefore share, and therefore cooperate. That first stable step on the plains of Laetoli was the beginning of a journey that would eventually encompass running across continents, jumping across chasms, and migrating to every corner of the globe. Our instability became our momentum. The constant, low-grade fear of falling may have even sharpened our awareness, fueling the curiosity and problem-solving skills that would define us. We traded the solid, static security of 4 legs for the dynamic, precarious potential of 2. And in doing so, we set ourselves on a path with no return, a path of endless motion and constant adjustment. We are the balancing act. But if this was such a successful evolutionary strategy, why did our closest cousins choose a different path? Why is it that the ape, our shared ancestor, remains the master of the trees, while we are forever the children of the open ground? The monkey swings through the canopy, a blur of effortless motion. Its body is a perfectly calibrated instrument for this arboreal world, each movement a testament to millennia of refinement. Meanwhile, below, a human ascends a ladder, each rung a conscious calculation of grip and balance, a clumsy imitation of a dance our ancestors once knew by heart. This divergence poses a silent, profound question. From a shared ancestral root, why did one branch choose to master the earth so completely that it nearly forgot the sky? Why did we trade the sure-footed grace of the climber for the stumbling, ambitious stride of the walker? The answer is not a single event, but a mosaic of biological trade-offs, historical pressures, and a unique cognitive spark that set us on a path of both loss and unimaginable gain. The most immediate evidence of our departure is written in the very architecture of our bones. For a primate, the body is a suspension bridge designed for grasping and swinging. The opposable big toe, a 5th hand reaching from the foot, provides a critical anchor point, curling around branches with a grip as sure as any fist. Our shoulders are high and mobile, sockets facing outward, allowing for a tremendous range of motion ideal for reaching overhead holds and bearing the body's weight from above. This is the body of a creature that lives in a 3-dimensional world. Our own skeleton, however, tells a different story, one of a being that chose a single dominant plane. Our big toe migrated, aligning itself with its 4 neighbors to form a stable platform, a propulsive lever for walking and running. This was a fundamental sacrifice. We lost the foundational grip that makes climbing an innate skill, trading arboreal security for terrestrial efficiency. Our shoulder blades rotated to our back, a change that stabilized the arm for powerful, precise throws and tool use, but cost us the effortless, overhead brachiation of our cousins. Our hands, once simple hooks for branches, were liberated. The fingers shortened, the thumbs strengthened, becoming instruments of astonishing dexterity. We gave up the universal grip for the precision grip, the power to cling to a tree for the power to shape a stone. Was this a loss, or merely the first payment on a colossal investment in a different kind of future? This biological restructuring was not a random mutation, but a response to a world in flux. The narrative etched in the fossil record and ancient soils tells of a great drying, a retreat of the vast African forests that once cradled our ancestors. Lush canopies gave way to open savannas, a sea of grass punctuated by scattered trees. For a creature built for the trees, this was a crisis. For a creature with the potential to change, it was an opportunity. The hominins who thrived were not those who clung most desperately to the vanishing forests, but those who dared to explore the new, horizontal world. Homo erectus, with their longer legs and reshaped pelvis, became the great walkers. They could cover vast distances, following migratory herds, discovering new resources, and escaping predators on a stage where running was more valuable than climbing. The energy required to move was a currency of survival, and the bipedal gait, for all its initial clumsiness, proved astonishingly frugal over long distances. The tree was no longer a home. It became an occasional refuge, a vantage point, a source of shade. The imperative to climb was no longer daily, and so the skill, no longer relentlessly honed, began to fade from our muscle memory. Did we choose the savanna, or did it choose us, sculpting our bodies and destinies with an indifferent hand? Yet, to frame this solely as a loss is to misunderstand the human trajectory. We did not simply lose the ability to climb, we transferred that imperative upward, abstracting it. We channeled the same primal drive into new domains. In the modern world, the echo of our arboreal past resonates in unexpected places. The rock climber, meticulously plotting a route up a sheer cliff face, is not just playing a sport. They are engaging in a profound dialogue with a deep-seated instinct, conquering gravity with a combination of strength and intellect their ancestors never possessed. The construction worker balancing on an I-beam high above the city, the firefighter ascending a ladder into smoke, the dancer whose performance defies gravity, all are expressing a variant of the same ancient impulse. Our technology became our new branches. We built ladders, stairs, and skyscrapers, creating artificial trees of steel and glass that we climb not with our toes but with our minds. We even took to the air itself. Is the astronaut, tethered to a ship and moving in the zero-gravity void, not the ultimate climber, having transcended the very concept of up and down? Our adaptation was not to a single environment, but to the very concept of adaptation itself. We became the generalists, the masters of reinvention. Does this versatility represent a higher form of evolution, or simply a more convoluted one? This line of thought inevitably circles back to a philosophical counterpoint. Can we truly call this progress, this so-called ascent of man? The trade-offs are real and etched into our collective physical ailments. Our vertical spine, a masterpiece of engineering for bipedalism, is a frequent source of pain, bearing down on discs with a pressure unknown to our quadrupedal relatives. The same liberated shoulders that allow us to throw a spear also make us prone to dislocations. Our flat feet are a poor substitute for the grasping feet of a primate when true climbing is required. We gain the world, but at the cost of a certain physical innocence, a seamless unity with our environment. We became thinkers, planners, builders, but we also became creatures who suffer from slipped discs and fallen arches. We exchanged a specific, embodied mastery for a generalized cognitive one. So, was it an upgrade, or merely a sideways step, a different set of strengths forever shadowed by a new set of weaknesses? Does evolution move forward, or does it simply move, exchanging one set of constraints for another in an endless neutral dance? We no longer move through the trees, but we build them. We no longer swing from branches, but we swing ideas into being. The forest we once inhabited was made of wood and leaf. The one we inhabit now is made of language, culture, and aspiration. We stepped down from the safety of the canopy and onto the uncertain, open plain, and in doing so, we started a journey that would eventually lead us to the moon. We traded the specific for the abstract, the instinctual for the intellectual. The monkey is a perfect expression of its environment, while a human is a question posed to theirs. And once that question was asked, there was no turning back. We did not just walk away from the trees. We began to run toward a horizon we alone could see. And in that first, sustained run across the savannah, a new rhythm was found, one that asked everything of the body and promised everything to the spirit. But what secret of energy, what hidden efficiency made this enduring stride possible? Imagine a treadmill, not in a modern gym, but set against the stark backdrop of our evolutionary past. Upon it, two figures, a human and a chimpanzee. They are not racing for speed. They are being measured for something far more fundamental: efficiency. The machine hums, sensors cling to their skin, and the results, when they finally appear, are quietly shocking. The human, walking on two legs, uses a quarter less energy than the chimpanzee lumbering on all fours. This simple experiment, conducted in a lab, echoes a choice made millions of years ago on the savannah. It wasn't a choice for speed or for power, but for endurance. What does it mean for a species to evolve not to be the strongest, but to be the one that tires the least? This profound efficiency is not an accident. It is written into the very architecture of our bodies, a masterpiece of biomechanical engineering honed by millennia. Our long legs act as pendulums, each step a controlled, gravity-assisted swing that propels us forward with minimal muscular effort. The powerful gluteus maximus, a muscle far more developed in us than in our primate cousins, acts as a stabilizer. It fires with each step, preventing our torso from wobbling excessively, channeling the force of our movement into a straight, purposeful line. And then there is the subtle, brilliant curve of our spine, the S shape that acts as a natural shock absorber. With every heel strike, a wave of impact travels upward, but this graceful curve dissipates that energy, cushioning the brain and preserving precious calories. This is the first layer of truth. Our bodies became specialized instruments for the conservation of energy over vast, unforgiving distances. We are not built for the explosive sprint, but for the patient, inexorable march. Is our form, then, a testament to the power of economy over brute force? This anatomical revolution found its ultimate expression in a species, Homo erectus, the upright man. With this new body, the world shrank and expanded simultaneously. Distances that were once insurmountable barriers became daily commutes. Anthropologists believe these early humans could cover dozens of kilometers in a single day, a feat that transformed them into the most fearsome of predators, the persistent hunter. Their strategy did not rely on claws, fangs, or blinding speed. It relied on a cool, relentless logic. They would simply follow. Under the scorching African sun, they would track a gazelle or a kudu, not in a frantic chase, but in a steady, unwavering pursuit. The animal would sprint away again and again, its body overheating, its energy reserves plummeting with each panic-stricken burst. The humans, walking efficiently, would simply keep coming, their bodies managing heat and energy with superior grace. Eventually, the animal would succumb to exhaustion, standing paralyzed and waiting for the end. The victory belonged not to the swift, but to the steadfast. Does this ancient strategy suggest that true power lies not in the intensity of an action, but in its sustained duration? This deep-seated legacy is not a relic. It pulses through our modern lives in ways we scarcely recognize. The marathon runner pushing through the wall, the pilgrim trudging a 1,000-year-old path to a distant shrine, the hiker drawn to a remote mountain peak. These are not merely hobbies or tests of will. They are echoes. They are a biological memory playing out in a technological world. When we choose to walk for miles, we are engaging in a profoundly human act, a cognitive experience rooted in our evolution. The rhythm of walking seems to unlock a different state of mind, a space for reflection, for problem-solving, for creativity. There is a reason thinkers from Aristotle to Nietzsche were ardent walkers. The movement of the body facilitates the movement of the mind. Could it be that our capacity for extended thought is somehow linked to our capacity for extended travel? Yet, this magnificent adaptation came at a cost, a brutal bargain struck by evolution. For the gift of efficiency, we paid in vulnerability. Our upright posture is a precarious balancing act, making us uniquely susceptible to falls, a danger especially grave for our young and our elderly. The same spine that so elegantly absorbs shock is also prone to slipped discs, arthritis, and chronic lower back pain, a near universal scourge of humanity. The intricate architecture of our knees and feet, fine-tuned for forward motion, becomes a site of exquisite failure under the stresses of modern life or simple aging. The very specialization that allowed us to conquer distances also made us fragile. So we must ask, does any evolutionary advantage ever come without a hidden, accompanying shadow? Is progress always a trade-off? A gain in one domain paid for by a loss in another? Perhaps the true value of bipedalism was never in the individual step, measured in mere joules of energy saved. Perhaps its power was in the collective journey it enabled. It was the ability to go far, to follow a migrating herd over a new horizon, to cross a desert in search of water, to spread out from a single cradle and, eventually, to touch every continent on the planet. Each efficient step was a deposit into a savings account of exploration, and the interest compounded over millennia was the entirety of human civilization. The journey did not just change our location, it changed our minds. It forced us to adapt, to innovate, to cooperate, to remember landscapes and anticipate seasons. The horizon was no longer a barrier, it became an invitation. And if walking so efficiently allowed us to traverse the physical world, did it also pave the neural pathways that allowed us to traverse the vast landscapes of thought and imagination? But how did our ancestors manage these epic journeys under the relentless African sun? If efficiency conserved energy, what protected them from the ever-present threat of overheating? A threat that their quadrupedal prey, running for their lives, succumbed to? The African sun at noon is a hammer. It flattens the landscape, bleaches the color from the dust, and drives every sensible creature into the shade. Lions pant in the deep thickets. Elephants stand motionless under acacia trees. The world holds its breath, waiting for the fury to pass. But in this molten silence, one creature is still moving. A figure, tall and lean, strides purposefully across the savanna. It is not faster than the antelope it follows, nor is it stronger than the predators it avoids. Its advantage is far more peculiar, a secret weapon forged in the crucible of the sun. It is cooler. And this simple, profound ability to walk and not overheat may have been the very thing that set our ancestors on the path to becoming human. This is the paradox of our origins. While other animals mastered the art of the explosive sprint, the ambush, or the armored defense, we embarked on a different evolutionary gamble. We bet on endurance, and to win that bet, we first had to solve the fundamental problem of the midday sun. The solution was not a single trait, but a symphony of biological adaptations conducted by a single revolutionary act: standing up. Bipedalism, our defining posture, is often celebrated for freeing our hands to carry tools and weapons. But its first and most vital gift might have been far more elemental. It was our first and most efficient air conditioning system. On a physiological level, the shift from 4 legs to 2 was a masterstroke in thermal management. Consider the geometry of a body under the tropical sun. A quadruped presents its broad muscular back directly to the sky, a flat plane absorbing the sun's relentless energy. By rising upright, our early ancestors, creatures like Australopithecus, drastically reduced their solar footprint. They minimized the surface area exposed to the direct vertical rays, presenting instead the relatively narrow crown of the head and shoulders. This new posture, however, was only half the equation. The other half was maximizing the surface area available for cooling. Standing upright exposes the vast majority of the body to the air, to the faintest whisper of a breeze that might travel across the plains. It elevates the body away from the radiant heat baking off the ground. This vertical form became a radiator, designed not to contain heat, but to shed it. This radiator needed a coolant, and evolution provided an exquisite one: sweat. Our bodies are covered in millions of eccrine glands, a network far more prolific than in any other primate. As we walked, our internal temperatures would rise, triggering this sophisticated sprinkler system. Tiny beads of moisture would emerge on the skin, and as they evaporated, they carried away vast amounts of heat with them. The efficiency of this system was supercharged by another trade-off. We lost our thick fur coat. What remained was fine, short body hair that, rather than trapping heat, actually aided the evaporation process by wicking moisture away from the skin and holding it aloft for the air to claim. We became, in essence, biological evaporative coolers, naked, sweating, upright machines built for persistence. Was this delicate balance of water and salt the price we paid for our place at the top of the food chain? The archaeological record whispers the story of how this physiological advantage was put to use. It is with Homo erectus, the upright man, that we see the full manifestation of this cooling strategy. Their bodies were modern in proportion, with long legs and short arms, built for striding, not climbing. The evidence suggests they were the first to consistently hunt during the most punishing hours of the day. This was not a hunt of speed or strength, but one of relentless pursuit. Persistence hunting. A small band of humans would identify a prey animal, a kudu or an antelope, and simply begin to follow it. These animals, built for explosive speed, have a catastrophic weakness. They must stop to pant in the shade to cool their brains. They cannot run and cool themselves simultaneously, but the humans could. They would walk and jog, maintaining a steady pace, their cooling systems working flawlessly. They would follow the tracks, never losing the trail, pushing the animal from one patch of shade to the next, never allowing it to rest and fully recover. Over miles and hours, under the hammer of the sun, the animal would eventually succumb to heat stroke. It would simply lie down, exhausted and hyperthermic, and the hunters would walk calmly up to it. The kill required no sophisticated weaponry, just a profound understanding of the thermal landscape and a body uniquely equipped to conquer it. Did this practice of measured strategic pursuit under the sun forge not just our bodies, but the very patterns of our cooperative minds? This ancient legacy is written into the fabric of our modern world. It is the reason a construction crew can work through a summer afternoon, why a marathon runner can push through the wall of fatigue, why children can play in a sun-drenched park long after a dog has retreated, tongue-lolling, to the porch. Our daily endurance is not merely a matter of fitness. It is a living echo of a 2-million-year-old survival strategy. Every time we sweat under the sun, we are participating in a ritual that defined our species. The ability to regulate our core temperature allowed for sustained activity, which in turn allowed for more complex foraging, wider exploration, and the kind of social cooperation that hunting demands. Our civilization, in a very real sense, was built on the foundation of a body that could stay cool under pressure. But have our modern lives of climate-controlled rooms and insulated vehicles made us forget the ancient pact we made with the sun? Of course, this evolutionary masterpiece came with a steep and constant price. Our cooling system is breathtakingly efficient, but it is also desperately wasteful. We are vulnerable in a way no other animal is. A sprinting cheetah risks overheating for minutes. A persistence hunter risks dehydration over hours. Our entire strategy depends on a ready and reliable access to water. To lose water is to lose the ability to think, to move, to survive. We became slaves to the water hole, our migrations and settlements forever tied to its presence. In gifting us the world, did our upright posture also chain us to a never-ending quest for the next drink? Is our famed intelligence in part simply a brilliant answer to the problem of finding more water to fuel our fragile, cooling bodies? So, was the trade-off worth it? The answer is written in our very bones and in the world we have built. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a revolutionary one. Standing up did more than just lift our eyes to the horizon. It lifted our entire species above the thermal constraints that bound every other creature. It allowed us to claim the hottest part of the day as our own, a time of opportunity when our competitors were forced to rest. And perhaps most importantly, this constant, steady walking unlocked something else. Each mile traveled under the sun required more calculation, more memory, more foresight. It demanded a better map of the land, a deeper understanding of animal behavior, and a richer communication between hunters. The brain, that most energy-hungry and heat-sensitive of organs, began to demand more fuel and better cooling to power this new way of life. The very act of walking to stay cool may have started a feedback loop of incredible consequence. As we walked farther, we needed to become smarter, and as we became smarter, we found new ways to walk even farther. But what if the brain that grew to navigate those vast, sun-drenched distances was itself a product of the walk? Could the very rhythm of our steps, the steady, cooling journey, have begun to shape the neural pathways within, expanding the mind with every mile traveled? The human brain is a paradox of flesh and energy. It accounts for a mere 2% of our body weight. Yet it is a ravenous furnace, consuming a staggering 20% of our daily calories. It is an organ of such immense metabolic cost that its very existence seems to defy evolutionary logic. Why would natural selection, a process so often geared toward efficiency and conservation, make such a risky, high-stakes investment? The answer to this profound question, it turns out, might not be found in the intricate folds of the cortex itself, but far lower in the simple, grounding mechanics of our feet. It begins with a single, revolutionary step. Imagine the world of our distant ancestors, a mosaic of shrinking forests and expanding savannas. The canopy, a once reliable cradle of food and safety, was receding. The ground offered new opportunities, tubers, carcasses, a horizon to explore, but it was also a domain of immense danger. To move through this world on all fours was to be low to the ground, a creature of limited vision and predictable movement. But to rise up onto two legs was to enact a quiet rebellion against gravity itself. This new posture, bipedalism, was awkward at first, a clumsy, teetering gait. Yet, it held a secret advantage, one that would quietly fuel a neurological revolution. Biomechanics reveals a startling truth. Walking upright is incredibly efficient. For a creature covering long distances under a scorching sun, the energy saved by a bipedal stride compared to a quadrupedal knuckle walk is significant. It is a conservation of effort, a metabolic bargain. Those precious calories, no longer entirely consumed by the arduous work of locomotion, became a surplus. And evolution, never one to waste an opportunity, funneled this newfound energy dividend into the most expensive organ we possess, the brain. This was not a conscious decision, but a slow, incremental reallocation of resources over millennia, a biological budget shift that funded a cognitive explosion. The liberation of energy was only one part of the story. The very architecture of our bodies began to reshape itself to accommodate this new vertical life. The skull, once anchored to a spine projecting horizontally from the back, found itself perched precariously atop a vertical column. This new balance required changes. The ancient, heavy brow ridges, the powerful jaw muscles anchored to a sagittal crest. These features began to recede. The skull became more graceful, its bones thinner, its shape rounder. It was as if the cranium itself was expanding, making room, quite literally, for what was to come. The foramen magnum, the hole through which the spinal cord connects to the brain, migrated forward to the base of the skull, centering the heavy head over the body's new axis of balance. This physical restructuring was a necessary precondition, a cranial cradle being gently carved out for the immense growth of the neural tissue it would one day hold. The body was building a new home, and it was waiting for its tenant to arrive. We can see this dramatic partnership between stride and synapse etched into the fossil record. Compare Homo habilis, the handyman, with its successor Homo erectus, the upright man. The former still spent time in the trees, its gait perhaps not fully committed, its brain size around 600 to 700 cubic centimeters, larger than an ape's, but not yet revolutionary. Then came Homo erectus, a global pioneer, with a body fully adapted for long-distance walking and running. And with this mastery of movement came a dramatic leap, a brain swelling to over 900 cubic centimeters. This was no coincidence. Freed from the constant caloric drain of inefficient locomotion, and empowered by a body that could range farther to secure richer, more diverse foods like meat and marrow, this new human had the fuel and the means to feed a hungrier mind. A larger brain allowed for the crafting of more sophisticated tools, like the symmetrical Acheulean hand axe, a task requiring foresight and planning. It enabled the complex social coordination needed for hunting, large game, and defending against predators. It demanded more nuanced communication, the precursors to language. Each step forward in locomotion seemed to unlock a new level of cognitive potential, creating a feedback loop of increasing intelligence. The feet were walking the body into a new world, and the brain was needed to map it. This journey from locomotion to cognition did not end with larger toolkits or bigger hunting parties. The brain that was nurtured by our bipedal stride is the same organ that contemplates the infinite, composes symphonies, and wrestles with morality. Our intelligence is not merely a calculator for survival. It is the source of our deepest emotions, our capacity for empathy, our relentless creativity, and our need to construct meaning. The same neural circuitry that allowed an erectus to anticipate the migration patterns of prey allows us to trace the patterns of the stars. The social bonds that were strengthened to ensure group survival now form the foundation of our cultures, our laws, and our philosophies. In a very real sense, the act of standing up did not just lift our eyes to the horizon, it lifted our consciousness. It pulled us slowly and irrevocably away from the immediate, instinct-driven world of pure reaction and into the abstract, contemplative realm of thought and imagination. Did our walking somehow necessitate our wondering? Yet, the story is rarely so linear. To suggest bipedalism was the sole catalyst for encephalization would be to ignore the beautiful complexity of evolution. Perhaps the brain's growth was primarily fueled by a shift in diet. The addition of calorie-dense, rich meat, and the use of fire to cook food, making it easier to digest and freeing up even more energy. Maybe the true driver was social competition, an arms race of intellect within. Increasingly complex tribes where the most clever individuals, the best storytellers and coalition builders, gained reproductive advantages. In this light, bipedalism was not the engine but merely the enabler, a necessary first step that made these other dietary and social revolutions possible. It created the conditions for the brain's growth without being its sole cause. So, did our brains grow because we walked upright? Or did we walk upright to free up energy so our brains could grow to handle the new complexities of a meat-based diet and intricate social landscapes? Can we ever truly untangle this web of cause and effect? The evidence suggests we cannot point to a single master switch. Instead, we see a cascade of adaptations, each interlocking with and reinforcing the other. Bipedalism, brain expansion, dietary change, and social complexity, they form a synergistic quartet, each playing its part in the symphony of human becoming. The simultaneous emergence of a stable, efficient gait and a rapidly expanding cranial capacity in the fossil record is too pronounced to be mere coincidence. It is a signature of a profound transition. It suggests that the physical act of standing upright may have been the foundational change, the first domino that set all others in motion. It was a gesture of defiance that changed our relationship with the world and with ourselves. So, if rising onto 2 feet was such a transformative advantage, sparking this incredible chain reaction of cognitive and cultural development, why did we walk this path alone? Why did no other primate, facing similar environmental pressures, fully commit to this upright destiny and follow us into the light of consciousness? What unique combination of chance and necessity set our ancestors on their solitary, 2-legged journey toward the stars? A chimpanzee can stand. A baboon can walk a few steps on 2 legs. In the dappled light of the forest, these postures are fleeting, mere punctuation in a long story written for 4 limbs. They are gestures, not a way of life. Yet one species, against all apparent logic, committed to this awkward, upright balance. We are the odd ones out, the perpetual acrobats on a high wire without a net. Was it a grand evolutionary mistake, a bizarre quirk of fate? Or were we the only ones who discovered a profound need, not just to see the world from a higher vantage point, but to look into each other's eyes. The blueprint for bipedalism is not a simple instruction. It is a complex, demanding architectural revision written deep into the skeleton. It demands a pelvis reshaped from a sturdy basin into a shallow bowl, a compromise that narrows the birth canal and makes human childbirth a uniquely perilous passage. It requires a spine that curves into a gentle S, a shock absorber that places immense, unforgiving pressure on vertebrae not designed for the task. The mighty gluteus maximus, a muscle that in our quadrupedal cousins is merely for propulsion, becomes in us the essential stabilizer, the burning anchor that keeps us from toppling forward with every step. This was not a switch that could be flipped. It was a cascade of painful, trade-off-laden adaptations, a biological gamble of the highest order. Other primates possessed the genetic potential for bipedality, but their bodies whisper a different, older story of stability and speed. They were not willing, or perhaps not forced, to pay such a steep price for mere elevation. Why would any species endure the agony of slipped discs and difficult births for the privilege of standing tall? What kind of evolutionary pressure could possibly justify that cost? The answer may lie not in the body itself, but in the vanishing world that shaped it. For millions of years, the story of primates was written in the vertical text of the forest, a world of branches and canopy. But the climate shifted. Forests receded, giving way to vast, open savannas. For one lineage of apes, the cradle of the trees was disappearing. The ancestors of Homo found themselves in a new, harsh theater of survival, a sea of grass under a relentless sun. In this new world, the old rules were obsolete. The quadrupedal sprint, so effective for short bursts between trees, became a liability over long distances. The need was no longer to climb quickly, but to see over the grass, to spot predators and prey from afar, to travel efficiently across immense expanses in search of scattered food and water. Bipedalism, for all its inefficiencies, offered a solution. It raised the eyes. It reduced the surface area of the body exposed to the scorching sun. It freed the hands, not just to carry tools or food, but to gesture, to point, to share information across the golden plains. It was a strategy born of necessity. The other primates remained in the dwindling forests, where 4 limbs were still the perfect key to a tree-locked world. For them, bipedalism was not an impossibility, it was an irrelevance. Why master the strange art of walking upright when the ancient art of climbing still served so well? And so, we stood. But this physical liberation may have ignited a social and cognitive revolution far greater than its environmental cause. By standing face to face, we entered a new dimension of connection. Our hands, no longer tasked with locomotion, became instruments of exquisite expression, a subtle gesture, a reassuring touch, a thrown spear held in shared purpose. Our faces, now level and constantly in view, became canvases for a new, complex language of emotion, a flicker of fear, a smile of recognition, a frown of concern. These signals could be read instantly, fostering empathy, coordination, and trust on an unprecedented scale. Upright, we could look into the eyes of another and see not just a competitor for resources, but a mind, an intention, a potential ally. This constant eye-level engagement may have been the crucible in which our consciousness was forged. We began to wonder not just what another was doing, but what they were thinking. Did the need to understand each other, to build a shared reality through gaze and gesture, actually craft the very architecture of our modern mind? Was walking upright less about moving across the land, and more about connecting across the divide between two selves? Yet, a dissenting voice whispers from our ancient past. What if this grand narrative of progress is built upon a fundamental flaw? 4 legs are, by any objective measure of engineering, superior. They are faster, more stable, more powerful. They do not suffer from chronic back pain or the vulnerabilities of a complicated childbirth. Perhaps we are not the pinnacle of a planned trajectory, but an evolutionary aberration, a species that stumbled onto a precarious path and was forced to make the best of it. We are the creatures out of phase, who traded raw, primal power for a strange, untested potential. Did our ancestors, in their desperate adaptation to a changing world, commit us to a lifetime of physical frailty in exchange for a promise they could not yet understand? Perhaps. But that very misalignment, that glorious deviation, set us on a course towards something the natural world had never before witnessed. It led us to tools, to fire, to art, to stories told around a flickering flame. It led us to the profound and haunting knowledge of our own existence. That journey, the one that would eventually ask questions of the stars and of the soul, began with a single tentative step. It began when we let go of the branch. And if that first step onto the open plain was the catalyst, one must wonder, what was the nature of the world that made letting go not just an option, but an imperative? When our ancestors finally left the forest, what specific alchemy of fear, opportunity, and necessity forced them to change not just their home, but their very way of moving through the world? The world was shrinking. The dense, tangled canopies that had cradled our ancestors for millennia began to recede, not in a sudden cataclysm, but in a slow, inexorable sigh of the earth. The forests, those verdant fortresses of abundance and safety, pulled back to reveal a new, terrifying expanse, the savanna. It was an open ocean of grass under a relentless sun, a landscape that offered no hiding place and no easy passage through the trees. For a creature built to clutch and climb, to swing and to hide, this was an existential ultimatum. Adapt to this vast openness, or perish. And so, they stood up. It is the most pivotal moment in our prehistory, a silent revolution written in bone and sediment. But what force truly compelled that first hesitant ascent onto 2 feet? Was it a deliberate stride into a new future, or a desperate stumble into the unknown? Imagine the sensation. The ground, once a soft mattress of decaying leaves and moist earth, now baked hard and unforgiving. The horizon, once obscured by a labyrinth of trunks and vines, now stretched to a dizzying infinity. Here the rules of survival were rewritten. In the forest, movement was a 3-dimensional art, a powerful grip, a calculated leap, a secure retreat to a high branch. The body was a compact engine of suspension, with long, powerful arms and curved fingers perfect for hooking over limbs. But the savanna demanded a different calculus. The rewards, new food sources, space, freedom from some predators, were vast, but the costs of travel were immense. There were no branches to swing onto the next meal. A distant grove of trees offering potential fruit or shelter might be miles away across sun-scorched ground. To move through this world, one had to cover distance efficiently. The body, that exquisite instrument, began to change under this new, brutal pressure. The fossil record, our fragmented scrapbook of deep time, tells this story of slow, grinding adaptation. In places like the Great Rift Valley of Africa, the earth has preserved a ghostly parade of our forebears. We find their bones, and in their subtle architecture, we read the narrative of a great leaving. The pelvis, that basin of bone, gradually widens and shortens, transforming from a platform for anchoring climbing muscles into a stable bowl to balance a torso standing upright. The femur, the thigh bone, angles inward, bringing the feet directly under the center of the body with each step, creating an efficient, energy-saving pendulum motion. The spine curves into a gentle S shape, a shock absorber for a brain jostled by the impact of bipedal strides. And perhaps most tellingly, the foot loses its grasping, thumb-like big toe, fusing into a rigid arch, a lever to propel us forward, but a permanent farewell to life in the trees. These changes did not happen in a generation. They unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years, a slow-motion metamorphosis written in calcium and stone. Each step away from the arboreal life was a trade-off, a gain in endurance for a loss in agility, a gain in visibility for a loss of cover. Was each minor adjustment a silent victory, or merely the best possible compromise in an unforgiving world? This was not merely a physiological shift. It was the first great act of risk-taking, a behavior etched so deeply into our lineage that it echoes in every human life today. The decision to venture out, not once but repeatedly over generations, was an embrace of the unknown. It was the original departure from the comfort zone. That same impulse, that restless genetic whisper, is what drives a person to leave their village for a distant city, to abandon a secure job for a precarious dream, to learn a new language or skill late in life. Migration, innovation, and exploration are not merely modern concepts. They are the cultural descendants of that first, brave, and terrifying walk into the tall grass. We are the children of those who chose to stand up and look toward the horizon, rather than retreat into the diminishing safety of the familiar. But does that mean we were destined for this path? What if the forests had never retreated? This is the counterpoint that haunts the neat story of adaptation, the specter of randomness. What if our ascent was not a triumphant march of progress, but a simple twist of fate? The climate changed, the forests shrank, and we happened to be the primates in the wrong place at the right time. There was no grand plan, no evolutionary destiny pointing toward tools and cities and civilization. Perhaps, under a slightly different set of circumstances, another creature would have taken that hesitant step. Or perhaps no one would have, and the story of intelligence on Earth would have remained whispered in the treetops, never to be shouted across the plains. This randomness is a humbling thought. It suggests that our profound journey, with all its art and science and war and love, might have begun with nothing more than a change in the weather. Does that diminish our achievement, or make the sheer improbability of our existence all the more breathtaking? Whether driven by necessity, opportunity, or mere chance, one thing is certain. That first step onto 2 feet was a door closing behind us. It was an irreversible threshold crossed. The act of standing freed the hands from the burden of locomotion, transforming them from mere instruments of grip into tools of exquisite manipulation. They could now carry food over long distances, gesture with complex meaning, and eventually shape stone into purpose. Upright, our ancestors could see over the grasses, spotting predators and prey from afar, their perspective on the world literally and figuratively elevated. This new posture, this new way of moving, did not just change our bodies. It began to change our minds, setting in motion a cascade of consequences that would hurtle us toward a future we could never have imagined. We left the forest and entered history. But in gaining the horizon, did we lose something essential about our place in the natural world? And as these new walkers traversed the expansive plains, their world now wide but fraught with danger, a new challenge emerged for the most vulnerable among them. An infant could no longer cling to its mother's fur in a canopy. It had to be carried. This simple, constant act, the cradling of a child in one's arms while walking, may have demanded more than just muscle. Did it require a new kind of cooperation, a new depth of social bonding, and perhaps even the earliest whispers of communication to soothe a child that could no longer hold on for itself? Could the very need to carry our young have been the cradle that rocked the first society into being? Imagine a mother, early in the story of our kind. The world around her is a chorus of potential threats and promises. In one arm, she cradles a bundle of sharp needs and soft vulnerability, her infant. With her other hand, she might grasp a tool, push aside a branch, or offer a morsel of food. She walks. This simple, profound act, walking while holding her child, is a scene so common we've forgotten its revolutionary nature. A primate mother must clutch her offspring with all 4 limbs, or, in some species, even carry it in her mouth while navigating the canopy. But this mother, our ancestor, walks upright. Her hands are free. This is not merely a change in locomotion. It is, perhaps, the first cradle. Could this simple anatomical shift, the act of carrying an infant, have been the quiet architect of the human heart, the very thing that taught us how to love? The biological catalyst for this revolution was bipedalism. Millions of years ago, the gradual shift to walking on 2 legs did more than just lift our ancestors' gaze to the horizon. It fundamentally re-engineered the relationship between parent and offspring. Those newly freed forelimbs became instruments of care, not just locomotion. They could hold a child close to the warmth of the body, offer protection from predators, and provide nourishment on the move. This physical liberation created a new biological imperative. Human infants are born spectacularly premature by the standards of other mammals, their brains developing largely outside the womb. This extended period of helplessness demanded a corresponding extension of care. Evolution responded not just with stronger arms, but with deeper chemistry. The hormone oxytocin, the agent of bonding and trust, began to weave its invisible threads more intricately through our physiology. The act of holding, carrying, and soothing a child became a feedback loop of attachment, reinforcing the neural pathways of empathy and connection. The body's architecture, in freeing the hands, may have forced the heart to build new rooms. Was compassion, then, first cradled not in the soul, but in the simple, sturdy geometry of the pelvis and the spine? This biological shift left its faint, poignant echoes in the dust of time. The archaeological record, that fragmented library of our past, offers whispers of this deepening bond. Consider the enigmatic Homo naledi, discovered deep within the Rising Star cave system in South Africa. Their remains, deliberately placed in a difficult-to-access chamber, suggest a funerary practice, a handling of the dead that transcends mere utility. Among them were the fragile bones of infants and juveniles. While the debate on their exact fate continues, the care required to place them there hints at a profound emotional investment. Similarly, Neanderthal burials, like that of a child at La Ferracie in France, show careful interment surrounded by tools and tokens. This is not the behavior of a species concerned solely with survival. It is the behavior of a species that grieves. The loss of a child was not just a biological failure, but a social and emotional rupture. The hands that once carried and comforted in life were now arranging a final resting place in death. Does the reverence we show our dead begin with the value we learn to assign to the living, fragile child we once carried? The legacy of that first cradling embrace is written into the very fabric of every human society that followed. The free hand that held a child is the same hand that eventually built a cradle, that cooked shared meals, that pointed to the stars to tell a story. It allowed for the development of culture itself, the slow, cumulative passing down of knowledge, not just through genes, but through gesture, touch, and whispered lullabies. This prolonged, intimate care became the training ground for all human relationships. It taught us patience, the ability to interpret nonverbal cues, and the rewards of selfless investment in another. The family unit, in its myriad forms across cultures, is built upon this foundational act of carrying. It is the prototype for every community, every tribe, every contract of mutual aid. The cooperation that built cities and launched civilizations did not spring from a cold, calculated logic, but from the deeply ingrained neural patterns formed when a parent's hand stroked a child's brow. Are our most complex social structures, then, merely scaled-up versions of that first primal circle of protection formed by a mother's arms? Yet, as with any profound shift, a counter-question lingers, a shadow to the light. Which came first? The free hand that allowed for greater care, or the desperately helpless infant that demanded it? Was bipedalism the cause of our nurturing nature, or was it a pre-adaptive trait that simply made the best of a biological predicament? The obstetrical dilemma, the evolutionary trade-off that forced human babies to be born early to allow their large-brained heads to pass through a bipedal pelvis optimized for walking, suggests a compelling alternative. Perhaps our ancestors were already committed to a path of intense childcare out of sheer necessity. The free hand was not the inventor of love, but its essential enabler, a perfect tool that arrived just in time for a crisis of vulnerability. In this view, did evolution simply find an elegant physical solution to a problem it had already created, or did the solution itself create a new, richer, emotional world? Can we ever truly separate the dancer from the dance, the act of carrying from the feeling of care that it fosters? Regardless of its prime mover, The act of carrying a child transcends its physical mechanics. It became a ritual, a silent language of love and security that predates all speech. It is the hammock in which trust is woven, the mobile classroom where the first lessons of safety and belonging are learned. This constant, portable intimacy forged the foundational bonds that allowed for larger and more complex social structures. It taught us that strength lies not only in individual might, but in the protection of the vulnerable, that cooperation yields a reward greater than any solitary gain. The cradle, in the end, might have been a more revolutionary invention than the club. It nurtured the empathy required for collaboration, which in turn seeded the concepts of shared responsibility, culture, and ultimately, civilization itself. The first steps we took on two legs did more than carry us across a savanna. They set us on a path toward a different kind of society, one built not just on survival, but on the profound, quiet power of connection. And if this is true, if our societies were indeed built upon the foundation of a simple, loving grasp, then what does it mean that we now walk so much of our journey alone? What have we left behind in our arms, now that they are so often filled with everything but each other? This journey of connection began with a single step, a reorientation of the entire body that started with the very ground beneath our feet. Of all the parts of our body, the foot is perhaps the most taken for granted, a humble servant hidden away in socks and shoes. Yet, if we could trace its lineage back through the deep, silent corridors of time, we would find a story of profound transformation. The human big toe, our hallux, once a sturdy, grasping hook that clung to the high branches of a forest world, now lies aligned with its fellows, a pillar of stability. It is a relic repurposed, a tool adapted for a new and daring enterprise. This quiet evolution, from a climbing instrument to the very foundation of our upright stature, prompts a deeper question. How did this re-engineered foot, this platform of bone and ligament, quietly rewrite the entire destiny of a species? Imagine the world of our distant ancestors, a mosaic of dense canopy and open grassland. In the dappled light of the disappearing forests, survival hinged on versatility. The foot was a hand, splayed and flexible, its opposable thumb a masterful grip on the gnarled bark of a tree, a secure hold for a child, a firm anchor in a precarious sleep. This was its ancient purpose, a design perfected over millions of years for a life among the branches. But the world was shifting beneath them. The continents groaned and climates changed, and the endless savannas stretched out like a taunt, a new and dangerous opportunity. To step onto that ground was to step into vulnerability. On two legs, the view was higher, the horizon broader, but the footing was uncertain. The old foot, a brilliant climber, was a clumsy walker. The pivot point of our fate began not in the brain, but in the subtle, relentless pressure of the earth against the soul. How does a species choose a new path when its very body is built for the old one? The answer is written in the slow, patient language of bone. The biological blueprint of our foot is a marvel of structural engineering, a story told in the language of genetics and anatomy. It is not a single slab of flesh and bone, but a dynamic truss of 26 bones, 33 joints, and a complex web of over 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments. The most telling departure from our primate cousins is the rigid, non-opposable big toe, now locked in parallel with the others. This alignment creates a powerful lever for pushing off the ground, a final, propulsive thrust in the rhythm of walking. But the true genius lies in the arch. The human foot is not flat. It is a vaulted bridge, a curved spring. This arch, supported by a taut ligament running from heel to ball, the plantar fascia, is our shock absorber. It collapses slightly under our weight with each step, storing elastic energy, then recoils to launch us forward with remarkable efficiency. This is the secret to our endurance, this built-in spring that turns a walk into a sustained, energy-conserving glide across the landscape. Our primate relatives, with their flexible, grasping feet, must use a far greater amount of muscular effort to move the same distance. Theirs is a foot for power and grip, ours is a foot for distance and persistence. Was it this simple architectural shift, the crafting of an arch, that unlocked the vast open continents for our wandering? The fossil record offers silent, stunning testimony to this transition. In Latoli, Tanzania, a layer of volcanic ash, softened by a brief rain, became the page upon which history's first chapter of walking was written. Preserved within it are 3 trails of footprints, unmistakably hominin, dating back 3.6 million years. The prints show a rounded heel, a deep impression from the ball of the foot, and a clear, forward-pointing big toe, no sign of a grasping thumb. Here was a creature, Australopithecus afarensis, already committed to the ground, already walking with a gait we would recognize as our own. This was the beginning. Later, with Homo erectus, the foot became the engine of a revolution. This was the first hunter, the first true explorer. Their long, striding legs were powered by this new, stable base. They did not merely amble from one fruit tree to the next. They pursued game across the golden grasses. They followed migrating herds. They carried tools, and they carried hope. Their footprints, though not preserved in stone, are etched into the very pattern of human migration out of Africa and across the globe. Every step was a conquest of space, every journey a gamble made possible by the reliability of the foot. Could the human saga of exploration, the insatiable drive to see what lies beyond the next hill, have ever begun without this steadfast platform? In our modern world, we have paved the wild grounds and shielded our feet in leather and foam, yet the foot's symbolic power remains undiminished. It is our point of contact with the planet, our literal ground of being. We speak of getting our footing in a new job, of standing our ground in an argument, of a foothold in a new market. The metaphors are so deep, they are invisible, woven into the fabric of our language. The foot is the agent of every human journey. It is the pilgrim on the dusty road to Mecca, the hiker feeling the crunch of gravel on a mountain trail, the runner chasing a personal truth with every pounding heartbeat on asphalt, the traveler stepping off a plane onto foreign soil. To set foot somewhere is to make a claim of experience, to move from the abstract to the real. It is the first and most fundamental act of discovery. When we kick off our shoes and feel the grass between our toes, are we, for a fleeting moment, reconnecting with that ancient ground, remembering the feeling of the earth that shaped us? Yet, for all its elegant design, this foundation is not flawless. Our modern lives have exposed its vulnerabilities. The same arch that grants us spring can fall, leading to flat feet and searing pain. The sturdy heel that absorbs our weight can become inflamed with plantar fasciitis, a sharp reminder of every step we take. Our supportive shoes have, in some ways, made our feet weaker, lazier, more prone to injury. We are a species born to walk vast distances, yet now we complain of sore feet after a day at the mall. Our skeleton is a museum of adaptations for a life we no longer lead. This invites a paradoxical thought. Is the human foot a perfect masterpiece of evolution, or is it a compromised design, a good enough solution that got us out of the trees and onto the plains, but one that creaks and groans under the pressures of a modern world it was never built for? Its imperfections whisper a humbling truth about evolution itself. It is not a pursuit of perfection, but a series of pragmatic fixes. Does our very pain connect us more intimately to the struggles of our ancestors, a shared ache across millennia? Perfect or not, this collection of bones is the only foundation we have. It bears the entire weight of our body, our history, and our ambitions. It is the unheralded platform upon which we built our world, the silent partner in every human achievement. It carried the first toolmakers to their flint, the first artists to their caves, the first farmers to their fields. It has marched in armies and danced in celebrations, trudged through despair and sprinted toward joy. Every great human story, every discovery, every love affair began with a single step. The foot is the quiet scribe of our progress, etching the narrative of our species, one step at a time, into the dust of the earth. It asked for nothing but the ground, and in return, it gave us the world. And if this resculpted foot was the instrument that let us walk into the sun-drenched open, what then did we do when we arrived there, naked and exposed, having traded our fur for the boundless sky? We are the naked apes. In the vast, fur-dressed family of primates, we stand alone, nearly hairless. The chimpanzee wears a thick, dark coat. The gorilla, a formidable blanket of fur. Even our closest relatives are shrouded, insulated, armored by nature. Yet we, Homo sapiens, emerged onto the savanna seemingly stripped bare, our skin offered directly to the sun, the wind, the world. This was no mere stylistic choice in evolution's grand catalogue. To lose one's fur is to lose a primary defense, to shed a universal mammalian inheritance. Why would we do such a thing? The answer, it seems, is written in the way we walk and the long, relentless journeys we began to undertake beneath a blazing African sun. The shift to bipedalism, that fateful step onto 2 feet, did more than free our hands. It re-engineered our relationship with the heat. A quadruped presents its broad, furry back directly to the overhead sun, a wide canvas for solar radiation. But an upright hominin presents a far smaller profile, a narrower silhouette to the zenith sun. This simple change in posture was a first crucial step in thermal regulation. Yet, the fur that had served our ancestors so well in the dappled shade of the forests became a liability on the open grasslands. It trapped heat, stifling the very body it was meant to protect. And so evolution began to edit. It favored those with finer, sparser body hair. It was a trade-off. The loss of a physical barrier for the gain of a physiological superpower. For we did not just lose our fur, we gained the ability to sweat profusely. Unlike other mammals that pant to cool down, we secrete moisture from millions of glands across our skin. When that moisture evaporates, it carries away a tremendous amount of heat. A dense pelt would mat down, preventing sweat from reaching the air, turning our cooling system into a hot, soggy prison. The naked skin became the essential partner to our sweaty prowess, a radiator exposed to the air, allowing us to dump heat with an efficiency no other large animal can match. This is how we became the persistence hunters, the long-distance walkers, who could outlast a sprinting antelope not by speed, but by steady, cool-headed pursuit under the very sun that forced our prey to rest in the shade. Was our intelligence, our endurance, our very dominance on the planet, purchased with the loss of our hair and the gift of sweat? This new, vulnerable skin then faced its own trial by fire, or more precisely, by ultraviolet light. Unprotected, exposed, it was a canvas upon which the sun wrote its own story of adaptation. In the crucible of equatorial Africa, the unrelenting UV radiation posed a dual threat. It could shred the precious folate in our blood, a vitamin critical for healthy reproduction and development, while also threatening to burn and damage the skin itself. The solution was a pigment, a natural sunscreen poured into the very fabric of our being, melanin. Darker skin, rich in eumelanin, became a shield, a magnificent adaptation that allowed us to thrive under the sun's intense gaze. It was a perfect biological compromise, filtering the harmful rays while still permitting the synthesis of vitamin D. As our ancestors began their great migrations out of Africa into lands where the sun's angle was lower and its light less fierce, the equation changed. In the gray skies of the north, the threat was no longer too much sun, but too little. The risk of folate depletion was replaced by the risk of vitamin D deficiency, and so the shield could be lightened. Skin tones softened, becoming a living map of human movement, a spectrum of adaptation painted directly onto the body. Our skin is not just a covering, it is a diary of our ancient journeys, a testament to our species' incredible plasticity. But if our skin is so perfectly adapted, why did we feel the need to cover it up again? This biological unveiling created a cultural vacuum. We had traded a physical fur for a physiological advantage, but in doing so, we stood revealed to each other in a way no other animal was. We became acutely aware of our own exposed state. This raw biological fact may have been the primordial seed from which culture grew its first garments. Clothing was not initially about modesty, it was likely about survival, protection from the cold on the journey into new climates, a barrier against thorns and scrapes. But it quickly, inevitably, became something more. It became a second skin, a social skin. The concept of shame, of modesty, of decency, is a uniquely human construct. An animal feels no embarrassment at its nakedness. It simply is. For us, the absence of our natural covering created a space for symbolism. To drape cloth over the body was to move beyond nature and into the realm of meaning. A loincloth, a hide, a woven tunic, these were no longer just practical items. They were signs. They spoke of tribe, of status, of role, of a shared understanding that our bodies, in their naked state, were something to be managed, curated, and interpreted. Did our self-consciousness, our intricate social rules, begin with the simple, shivering act of wrapping ourselves against a world for which we were no longer fully physically equipped? Yet, the story of our nakedness may not be so straightforward. Perhaps the thermoregulation theory, elegant as it is not the whole truth. Maybe the driving force was not the sun, but something smaller, more insidious, parasites. A fur coat is a perfect habitat for lice, ticks, and fleas, carriers of disease and irritation. An individual with less hair would be a less hospitable host, perhaps enjoying better health and greater fitness, or perhaps the change was driven by the intricate dance of sexual selection. Smooth skin could have become a billboard of health, a signal free of parasites, displaying unblemished quality to a potential mate. In this reading, our nakedness is not just a cooling system, but a walking, talking certificate of good health. It might even be that all these factors, thermoregulation, parasite load, and mate choice, conspired together, each reinforcing the other in a feedback loop that accelerated our loss of fur. Does the complexity of these competing theories suggest that the evolution of our bodies is a story with no single author, but a chorus of environmental pressures and social desires singing together? Whatever the precise catalyst, the result was a profound vulnerability. We were left psychologically exposed, a species aware of its own softness in a world of hard edges. This visceral sense of being unprotected, of being a tender thing in a harsh universe, may have been the primordial itch we could not scratch. And so we sought cover, not just in animal skins and woven cloth, but in more abstract shelters. We began to weave narratives, to build rules of conduct, to construct elaborate systems of meaning. Language, ritual, morality, these, too, became garments. They are the cultural fabrics we wrapped around our collective nakedness to protect ourselves from the existential chill, to make sense of our unique and uniquely exposed condition. Our loss of a physical pelt forced us to grow a psychological one, infinitely more complex and varied. We traded the uniformity of fur for the diversity of culture. Is it possible, then, that our deepest abstractions, our art, our laws, our gods, are, in the end, just an elaborate form of clothing for a soul that feels the wind? And if the story of our skin is one of exposure and adaptation, what of the hands that this upright posture freed? Those hands, no longer required for locomotion, were left dangling, empty, and full of potential. They would learn to hold more than just tools. They would learn to grasp the very threads of time itself. For a free hand does not just throw a spear or chip a stone. A free hand can eventually cradle a piece of charcoal, trace a line on a cave wall, and in doing so, begin to write a message that would echo across millennia. One of the earliest images we have of ourselves is not a face, not a body, but a hand. Pressed against a cold cave wall in pigment and breath, it is a declaration. I was here. That same hand which once clutched a rock to smash bone and marrow now holds a pen to write poetry, a brush to paint light, a hand to offer comfort or caress a loved one. It is a tool of survival transformed into an instrument of meaning. We often celebrate our upright posture for the view it afforded us, for lifting our gaze to the horizon. But what if the true revolution wasn't in the standing itself, but in what it left behind? What if our legs didn't just help us stand, they set our hands free to begin the slow, miraculous work of creation? This liberation was not merely physical, it was neurological, a rewiring of destiny etched into our very cells. When our ancestors descended from the trees and began to walk the savanna, a profound shift occurred. The forelimbs were no longer required for locomotion, for bearing the body's weight branch to branch. They were emancipated. This new freedom triggered an evolutionary cascade. The intricate neural architecture dedicated to controlling the hand, particularly the fingers, began to complexify at an astonishing rate. The brain's motor cortex allocated vast new territories to the delicate dance of the thumb and forefinger, a dance of opposition that would become the bedrock of our species' genius. This was not just about strength, it was about precision. It was the development of the capacity for a power grip to wield a club, yes, but also a precision grip to thread a needle, to hold a charcoal stick, to feel the subtle texture of a tool stone. With each generation, the feedback loop between hand and brain grew richer, more sophisticated. The hand asked questions of the world, and the brain evolved to understand its answers. Could the very structure of our modern consciousness, our ability to conceptualize and manipulate abstract symbols, be traced back to the simple, freeing act of letting our hands dangle by our sides? The evidence of this liberated potential is strewn across the millennia, a trail of stone and pigment leading directly to us. The first tangible whispers of this new mind are the Oldowan tools, simple flakes of stone napped by a hominin hand some 2.6 million years ago. To our eyes, they are crude, just broken rock. But to hold one is to feel a ghost of an intention, the first faint echo of a thought made solid. It was a hand imagining a sharper edge, a more efficient cut. This was the birth of technology, but it was only the beginning. Leap forward hundreds of thousands of years to the darkness of Chauvet Cave. Here, the human hand did not just make a tool, it made meaning. Using ochre and charcoal, those same fingers that could skin a bison traced the magnificent charging forms of horses and lions onto the rock, and alongside them, as if to forever cement the connection, they pressed their own hands, spraying pigment over them to leave a negative imprint, a signature. The toolmaker had become the artist. The hand that could kill also created beauty. It was a declaration that went beyond mere existence. It was the emergence of a secondary consciousness, a need to express, to communicate, to say, I see this and I feel this, and here is the proof. Was this impulse to create art, to leave a mark, as fundamental to our being as the impulse to eat or to run? This journey from the stone core to the stylus continues unabated into our modern world. Our culture is built upon and transmitted through the work of our hands. Every signature on a contract, every handshake that seals a deal, every keystroke that writes a line of code, every gentle touch that soothes a child. These are all extensions of that primordial liberation. The pen is not just a tool, it is the direct descendant of the charcoal stick in Chauvet. The computer mouse is a smoothed and polished riverstone, its function utterly transformed by the intent behind the hand that guides it. Our hands are the primary instruments of our cultural will, the means by which abstract thought becomes tangible reality. From the grip of a sculptor's chisel to the precise gesture of a surgeon's scalpel, we continually reshape the world in the image of our ideas. And in this light, every symphony composed, every theorem proven, every building constructed can be seen as the ultimate consequence of an upright gait and two hands, finally free to do more than just walk. Yet, this same freedom carries a devastating paradox. The hand that paints a sublime sunset on a canvas is the same hand that guides a knife into the heart of another. The hand that carves a cradle for a newborn is the same that forges a club to dash out a life. The precision grip that allows a watchmaker to assemble the delicate gears of a timepiece also allows a soldier to pull the pin from a grenade. Our creativity and our capacity for destruction are born from the same source, fashioned by the same opposable thumb. This duality forces a difficult question. Are our hands merely neutral tools, empty vessels waiting to be filled by the intentions of the heart and mind? Do they possess no inherent moral quality, equally adept at crafting a prayer or crafting a weapon? Does their freedom absolve them of the consequences of the acts they perform, making them simply the messengers of a will that originates elsewhere, in the shadowy recesses of the human psyche? Perhaps. But to see them as merely neutral is to ignore their profound role in the dialogue of being. It is through our hands that we first learn the texture of the world, that we understand hard and soft, warm and cold. They are not just executors of will, they are also its shapers. The very act of creation, of shaping clay, of building a wall, of writing a word, can soften a heart hardened by anger. Conversely, the repetitive act of violence can callous the soul. The hands are the place where abstract intention meets physical reality, and in that meeting, both are altered. Our upright posture was the beginning of this great division of labor, not just anatomically, but existentially. The legs took on the work of movement, of pursuit and flight, grounding us in the physical world. The arms and hands were freed for the work of manipulation, of expression, of connection, and of violence. This biological freedom granted us a choice, and with that choice came a responsibility that no other creature bears. Our hands became the instruments of our will, for better or for worse. They are the place where our deepest humanity is both crafted and betrayed. So if our freed hands are the instruments of our history, writing our sagas in both art and blood, then what does it mean that the very same adaptation that allowed us to run so far and hunt so well also set the stage for this eternal conflict within us? The antelope is a blur of dust and muscle, a creature built for explosive escape. It can vanish from a human sight in seconds, its speed a definitive answer to the question of survival. Yet hours later, under the same relentless sun, that same magnificent animal might be found trembling, exhausted, its sides heaving as a figure approaches at a steady, unhurried walk. The figure is not faster. It is simply still moving. This is the ancient paradox of human predation. We did not win the race by sprinting. We won by redefining the finish line. Our secret weapon was not speed, but stamina. The profound, simple, and world-altering power of going the distance. Consider the body of a long-distance runner, a form sculpted by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. It begins with the act of standing upright, a shift that recalibrated our entire relationship with the world. This new posture did more than free our hands. It streamlined our bodies for efficient travel. Our spine curves into a shock-absorbing spring. Our legs become long pendulums, and our gluteus maximus, that powerful muscle that defines our shape, evolved not for climbing, but for stabilizing our trunk during the relentless, rhythmic act of running. But the true masterpiece of our endurance lies not in our mechanics, but in our internal climate control. While most mammals pant to cool down, a limited system that fails under prolonged strain, we humans sweat. Our bare skin, having shed its thick fur, becomes a vast, evaporative cooling system. We can dissipate heat while in motion, a continuous process that allows us to function under a sun that forces other predators into the shade. We are biological marvels of persistence, engines built not for a sudden burst, but for a slow, inexorable burn. Is it possible that our greatest intellectual leap was first made possible by our ability to simply not stop? The theory of persistence hunting is not mere speculation. It is a narrative written in the dust of ancient savannas and corroborated by the few remaining cultures who keep the old ways. Imagine a small band of Homo erectus, 2 million years ago, setting their sights on a kudu or a wildebeest. The hunt does not begin with a chase, but with a choice. They identify their prey under the midday sun and begin to follow. They walk. They jog at a slow, sustainable trot. Their pace is a form of psychological and physiological warfare. The animal, triggered by their presence, sprints away in a panic, its core temperature spiking. It must stop to rest in the shade, to pant, to cool its overwhelmed system. But just as its breathing slows, the hunters arrive, steady and relentless, forcing it to run again, and again, and again. This cycle repeats for miles under the heat of the sun that is the human's ally. The animal's flight response, its greatest asset, becomes its fatal flaw. It is a battle of thermal regulation, and the human body is uniquely equipped to win it. The prey eventually succumbs to hyperthermia, collapsing in a state of delirious exhaustion, offering itself to the patient walkers who finally catch up. The victory belongs not to the strongest or the swiftest, but to the most enduring. Does this ancient chase echo in the modern thrill of the hunt? Or has it been transformed into something else entirely? That echo is precisely what we find in the rituals of our modern world. We no longer need to run down our dinner, yet millions of us lace up running shoes to punish our bodies on asphalt tracks and forest trails. The marathon is a global phenomenon, a test of will that offers no tangible reward beyond a medal and a fleeting sense of accomplishment. We trek for days through mountainous terrain, our backs aching under heavy packs, to reach a summit whose only value is the view. Why? These are not merely sports. They are unconscious rehearsals of a deep, ancestral memory. They are a cultural echo of that primal endurance. In pushing our bodies to their absolute limit of stamina, we are reenacting the very mechanism that secured our place at the top of the food chain. The marathoner hitting the wall is confronting the same metabolic crisis that felled the antelope, but pushing through it with a conscious will that mirrors our ancestors' unconscious drive. It is a celebration of a biological gift, a way of remembering with our muscles what our minds have forgotten. We prove our superiority, not in a flash of speed, but in the quiet, grinding power of persistence. Is the marathon, then, a form of urban worship for an evolutionary god? Yet, a compelling counterargument emerges from the comfort of the modern world. If endurance was our first technology, then the spear, the bow, and eventually the domestication of the horse were upgrades that rendered the original model obsolete. Why walk for days when you can ride? Why track an animal to its thermal demise when an arrow can deliver a swift, distant death? Our intellect quickly devised tools that shortcut the need for mere stamina. In the digital age, this evolution has accelerated beyond anything our ancestors could conceive. We have vehicles that outrun any cheetah, drones that can surveil from the sky, and delivery systems that bring the product of the hunt to our door without a single step taken. Our world is designed for immobility. Could it be that this hardwired desire to move, to wander, to push our physical limits is now a vestigial impulse, a ghost in the machine of our advanced civilization? A quaint, outdated instinct that has outlived its purpose, like an appendix waiting to be removed? Perhaps the answer is not so simple. While our tools have undoubtedly replaced the necessity of long-distance travel for survival, they have not eradicated the deep-seated impulse that it forged within us. The intellect may have supplanted the foot in many practical tasks, but the foundation of that intellect was built upon a mobile, curious, and persistent body. Our ability to think, to plan, to imagine what lies beyond the next horizon, may be intrinsically linked to our history as the animal that goes there. The thirst to explore Mars or the depths of the ocean is perhaps the ultimate extension of that same drive that once made us follow a set of tracks across the plains. The body that learned to walk vast distances carried a brain that learned to think vast thoughts. We traded the physical pursuit of prey for the intellectual pursuit of ideas, but the engine of pursuit remains the same. So we are left in a state of tension between the comfort of our tools and the call of our anatomy. We are creatures of intellect who remember, in our very bones, what it means to be creatures of endurance. The marathon runner and the couch potato are two sides of the same evolutionary coin. One heeds the ancient whisper, the other enjoys the modern silence. But that whisper is always there, a faint, persistent rhythm beneath the noise of civilization. It suggests that our journey was never just about catching prey, but about the act of journeying itself, the relentless, undying human need to see what lies beyond, to push past the point of exhaustion, and to touch what is just out of reach. If our minds now travel where our bodies cannot, does the ghost of the persistence hunt still steer the course? And if our endurance shaped our bodies and our fortunes, could the very way we stand have also shaped the way we connect? What if the simple act of rising onto two legs did more than make us efficient walkers? What if it made us readers of intention, translators of a silent language written in the subtle shifts of a torso, the angle of a shoulder, the open palm of a hand? A single glance, a smile, a furrowed brow. Without a word, the human body can speak volumes. But have you ever considered that our very posture, the simple, profound act of standing upright, might be the reason we look into each other's faces so intently? This vertical stance, a signature of our species, did more than just free our hands. It may have fundamentally reoriented our social world, placing our most expressive canvas, the face, directly in the line of sight. It turned our gaze horizontal, setting the stage for a silent, continuous conversation of expressions that predates and undergirds every word we utter. Consider the anatomy of it. When our ancient ancestors shifted from a quadrupedal crouch to a bipedal stance, the world literally changed perspective. The horizon line became the dominant plane of existence. More crucially, the face, once angled toward the ground in search of scent or sustenance, now projected forward, meeting the world and each other head-on. This was a monumental shift in sensory priority. Smell, the primary information highway for so many mammals, gradually ceded its dominance to sight. And what was there to see directly ahead at the perfect focal length but the nuanced, dynamic landscape of another's countenance? This new alignment allowed for an unprecedented clarity in observing the subtle flutter of an eyelid, the slight tightening of lips, the complex dance of muscles around the eyes that signifies a genuine smile, distinct from a mere baring of teeth. Our neural architecture evolved in concert, developing sophisticated mirroring systems and dedicated regions for decoding these minute muscular contractions, transforming them into understood emotion. We became hardwired to read each other, our brains lighting up not just at the sight of a face, but at the specific configuration of joy, fear, surprise, or anger etched upon it. Was this, then, the birth of deep empathy, not an abstract concept, but a physiological response triggered by the unobstructed view of another's emotional state? The fossil record offers tantalizing, silent clues to this evolution of expression. Look at the skull of a Homo neanderthalensis. Their face is a remarkable structure with a massive nasal cavity to warm the cold air of their Ice Age world, but also with pronounced brow ridges and a mid-face that some paleoanthropologists suggest allowed for a greater range of nonverbal communication. In the harsh, collaborative world of Pleistocene hunter-gatherers, survival depended on complex social cohesion, coordinating a hunt, sharing food, caring for young. These activities required a fluency that went beyond grunts. A quick, knowing glance across a campsite could communicate danger or agreement or reassurance more efficiently and quietly than any sound. The act of standing and walking together, facing the same direction toward a common goal, also necessitated new ways to stay connected without constant verbal chatter. The face became the billboard for intention and mood. Could the increasingly sophisticated social structures we infer from their tools and burial sites have been built, block by block, on a foundation of these wordless face-to-face exchanges? Did the need to be understood, to belong to a group whose survival hinged on mutual trust, literally sculpt our features to be more legible to one another? This ancient legacy is the bedrock of our modern communication. Today we are told that a staggering majority of what we convey is nonverbal. The words are merely the text. The tone, the pace, the posture, and most importantly, the facial expressions are the rich subtext that gives them true meaning. A speaker stands at a podium, and the audience reads their conviction or their uncertainty in the set of their jaw. Lovers lean in across a table, their conversation happening as much in the meeting of their eyes as in the spoken syllables. A parent silences a child with a single look. All of this intricate, powerful communication relies on that primal, physical fact. We are upright creatures, and our faces are on permanent, visible display. We have built entire cultures around the art of the glance, the politics of the smile, the intimacy of a shared gaze. In a world increasingly mediated by screens that flatten our expressions into emojis, do we feel a primal sense of loss, a hunger for the full, high-resolution data of a real, human face communicating in real time? Yet, a counter-argument whispers from the edges of this theory. Is the face's expressiveness truly the driver, or merely a fortunate byproduct? Perhaps we bestow upon these micro-movements a meaning they never independently held. Could it be that the real engine of our social evolution was language itself, complex, symbolic, spoken language, and the expressive face simply evolved as a supporting actor to emphasize, contradict, or punctuate the verbal script? We are, after all, the species that named the world. Does the primacy we give to a smile or a frown simply reflect our own cultural bias, a story we tell ourselves about connection, while the cold, hard logic of grammar and syntax did the real work of building civilization? Are we, in our search for a more visceral, emotional origin story, guilty of romanticizing a simple twist of evolutionary fate, of making a masterpiece out of what was, initially, just a convenient accident of posture? Regardless of its origin, the reality of our daily experience is undeniable. Before a single word is formed, before an argument is constructed or a promise made, we look into each other's eyes. It is the first handshake between two consciousnesses. That initial moment of recognition, of assessing intention and emotion, sets the stage for everything that follows. The act of standing upright engineered this encounter, placing our windows to the soul directly across from one another, at the perfect height for connection, for challenge, for love, and for war. It created a level playing field of perception, where we are all simultaneously readers and open books. So, while the power of language is undeniable, the eyes remain the first and most immediate interface, and it was our upright stance that drew every face onto the same horizon line. But if standing straight unlocked the silent poetry of our faces, what of the voice that eventually broke the silence? Did this same vertical alignment, this uncurling of the spine, also create the physical space for a new kind of sound to emerge? One less guttural and more nuanced, capable of carrying not just alarm, but complex thought and melody. What chain of anatomical alterations did bipedalism set in motion that would eventually allow us to speak our minds after we had already spent so long showing our hearts? Dogs bark, birds sing, whales compose complex songs, but only humans speak. This singular ability to weave abstract ideas into shared sound, to warn, to woo, to weave entire worlds with words, sets us apart in the living world. The question of how this miracle began has echoed through the ages, a puzzle buried deep in our prehistory. Perhaps the answer doesn't start with a spark of intellect, but with something far more mundane, a shift in posture, a slow, monumental straightening of the spine that lifted our gaze to the horizon and, in doing so, may have unlocked the very instrument of speech. It began when we raised our heads and our throats were set free. Consider the architecture of sound. For a creature to produce the vast array of vowels and consonants that form language, it requires a specific and strangely precarious physical setup. The crucial change is found in the descent of the larynx, the voice box. In most mammals, this structure sits high in the throat, allowing the epiglottis to lock securely with the soft palate. This creates a sealed breathing tube for efficient panting and drinking, but it leaves little room for the airway above the larynx to act as a resonant chamber. It is a design for survival, not for song or speech. The human journey toward language involved a dramatic anatomical trade-off. As our ancestors began to walk upright consistently, a cascade of adjustments followed. The skull, balancing atop the vertebral column, shifted its position. The muscles of the neck and tongue reconfigured. Over millennia, the larynx began a slow migration downward into the throat. This new lower position was, from a survivalist's view, a step backward. It created a risk of choking, a vulnerability where food and air share a passageway with a sometimes fatal proximity. Why would evolution favor such a flaw? Because it crafted a masterpiece from a mistake. This elongated vocal tract became a dynamic, tunable chamber. The tongue, now with more room to maneuver, could shape and sculpt the breath passing through with intricate precision. A simple grunt could become an ah, an ee, an oo. The expelled air could be stopped, started, hissed, or hummed. The body had built its own instrument. But an instrument is nothing without a player. This new physical capacity demanded a new level of neurological control. The act of speaking is a breathtakingly complex exhalation. It requires a subtle, sustained, and precisely modulated stream of air. Each phoneme, each syllable, is a tiny dance of the diaphragm, the rib cage, and a suite of muscles governing the breath. This fine motor control over respiration, so essential for sustained speech, is another gift of bipedalism. The stable, upright posture freed our respiratory system from the compressions of a quadrupedal gait, allowing for the conscious, controlled breath that gives power and nuance to our voice. Was this the moment the first word was formed? Not quite. But it was, the moment the body first whispered that it was possible. This theory, however, remains a ghost in the fossil record. Bones can tell us about stature, diet, and brain size, but how does one fossilize a sound? How does one find the voice of the dead? Scientists search for whispers in the stone, for subtle clues in the skeletons of our ancestors. A key piece of evidence is the hyoid bone, a delicate horseshoe-shaped bone that anchors the muscles of the tongue and larynx. It is the architectural keystone of the vocal tract. In 1989, a Neanderthal hyoid bone was discovered in Kibera Cave, Israel. It was dated to roughly 60,000 years old, and to the astonishment of researchers, its shape was virtually indistinguishable from our own. This fragile relic suggested that Neanderthals possessed a vocal tract capable of producing the full range of human speech sounds. The evidence pushes back even further. Studies of a Homo heidelbergensis skull from Cima de los Huesos in Spain, dating back some 430,000 years, point to auditory capabilities finely tuned to the frequencies of human speech. It seems the anatomical potential for language, this refashioning of the throat and the ear, was being laid down deep in our shared evolutionary past, long before the dawn of our own species. These ancestors walked upright. Their bodies had undergone the great shift, and their throats, it appears, were ready. They had the hardware, but did they have the software? Did they sit around their fires and share stories of the day's hunt, or mourn their dead with words of loss and longing? The bones suggest the capability, but they hold their silence on the content. They offer us the shape of the vessel, but not the wine it contained. And what a vessel it has proven to be. This physiological adaptation, this descended larynx, was not an end in itself, but a beginning. It was the cracking open of a door through which would pour the entirety of human civilization. Language is the loom upon which we weave the fabric of society. It allowed for the transmission of knowledge not just through imitation, but through explanation. The precise way to knap a flint tool could be described, not just shown. The location of a migrating herd could be discussed and a plan formulated. With language, experience became cumulative, passed down through generations, accelerating our learning and our technology. It allowed for the creation of abstract thought, of law, of philosophy, of justice, of myth. The stories of gods and heroes, the rules of social conduct, the shared identity of a tribe, all of these are impossible without the nuanced, flexible medium of speech. The upright posture that freed our hands to carry and to craft also by freeing our throats gave us the means to coordinate that crafting, to teach it, and to celebrate it. Our greatest collective achievements, from the first communal hunt to the symphonies of Mozart, from the laws of Hammurabi to the theories of Einstein, all trace a line back to that fundamental rewiring of our anatomy. The voice, once liberated, became the architect of our world. Yet to attribute the miracle of language solely to a dropped voice box is to confuse the violin with the symphony. A sophisticated vocal tract is a necessary condition, but it is far from sufficient. Parrots possess a similar anatomical setup and can mimic our sounds with stunning accuracy, but they cannot grasp the abstract grammar and meaning that underpins true language. The real engine of speech is the brain. The development of Broca's and Wernicke's areas, neural centers dedicated to the production and comprehension of complex language, represents a parallel evolution, a cognitive revolution that had to march in lockstep with the anatomical one. Perhaps the descent of the larynx was not the cause of language, but an effect. Maybe as our brains grew larger and our social worlds more complex, creating a selective pressure for more sophisticated communication, our bodies simply adapted to meet the new demand. The brain needed a better instrument, and the throat complied. Did standing upright initiate the process, creating the spare energy and the social conditions for bigger brains and more complex communication? Or was it the growing brain, hungry for expression, that commanded the body to change? The relationship is an intricate dance, not a simple chain of cause and effect. We are left with a chicken and egg paradox buried in the deep time of our evolution. So we are left not with an answer, but with a profound connection. The act of standing up straight did not gift us language outright, but it may have set the stage, creating the physical and social conditions for its eventual emergence. It gave us the breath control, the vocal versatility, and perhaps the cognitive space to begin the greatest journey in human history, the journey into shared meaning. The story of language is a tapestry woven from many threads, anatomical, neurological, social. The descended larynx is one vibrant, crucial strand in that tapestry. It is the physical proof that our bodies are not just carriers for our minds, but active participants in our humanity. Our voice, in its very biological essence, is sculpted by our posture, by our history, by our way of moving through the world. We began to speak not just because we thought, but because we stood. And from that new vantage point, we saw a world worth describing. If our voice was born from the posture of our bodies, then what other hidden melodies might our upright stance still hold, waiting to be heard? A child takes its first step, a wobbling, momentous launch into a world no longer measured by the crawl. And then, not long after, comes the first true word. Not a babble, but a sound with intent, a label for a world suddenly seen from a new, elevated perspective. Is this a simple coincidence of development, a neat parallel in the timeline of growing up? Or is it a profound echo from our deepest past, a clue that the very act of walking upright might have been the silent architect of the voice that would one day tell its story? The architecture of our own bodies offers the first tantalizing clue. Deep within the folded landscape of the human brain, two neighboring territories are engaged in a constant, intimate conversation. The motor cortex, a strip of tissue that commands the intricate ballet of our muscles, sits cheek by jowl with Broca's area, the workshop where thoughts are forged into the raw material of speech. This physical proximity is no accident of real estate. It suggests a shared evolutionary history, a deep-seated connection between the fine-tuned coordination required to balance on 2 feet and the exquisitely precise motor control needed to shape a stream of breath into a word. To form the sound of a B or a P, the lips must meet with a specific pressure and timing. To articulate a T, the tongue must tap precisely behind the teeth. This is not so different from the micro-adjustments of an ankle stabilizing the body's weight on uneven ground. Could it be that the neural pathways for complex movement were the very roads that language later learned to travel? That the circuitry for a steady gait was co-opted, refined, and put to use in the service of syntax and syllable? This neural partnership finds its origin story not in the life of a single child, but in the deep, slow time of our species. The fossil record tells a silent tale of a great transformation. As our ancestors descended from the trees and the savanna grasses grew tall, a new posture began to emerge. The spine curved into an S shape, the pelvis broadened into a bowl, the skull shifted to balance atop the vertebral column. This was not a swift change, but a gradual reordering of the body, demanding a parallel expansion within the skull. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of foresight, planning, and complex social cognition, began to grow. This same region is vital for both the conscious, deliberate control of bipedal movement and the intricate organization of language. To walk is to constantly plan 2 steps ahead, to predict the terrain, to adjust. To speak is to organize a stream of consciousness into a linear, logical sequence. Did the cognitive muscle built for navigating the physical world become the very tool for navigating the social one? Upright, our hands were freed from locomotion, becoming instruments of gesture, of tool-making, of touch. This new physical grammar of expression, a pointed finger, a comforting hand, a mimed action, may have provided the first scaffolding upon which the grammar of spoken language could be built. Communication became richer, more nuanced. A band of hunters could now coordinate a complex strategy over a distance with silent signals. A gatherer could show, not just led, others to a bounty of ripe fruit. The step and the story became intertwined in the dance of survival. We can see the ghost of this ancient dance in the development of every human child. Developmental psychologists often observe a period of what some call dual activation. As a toddler gains confidence in their walk, transitioning from a teetering stumble to a determined, joyful run, there is frequently a parallel explosion in their vocabulary and sentence complexity. It is as if the same cognitive and metabolic resources, once entirely consumed by the Herculean task of achieving balance, are now freed up for another great project, the mapping of the world through names and narratives. The body, having mastered the physics of its own propulsion, turns its energy outward, to the physics of social connection. The child who can run to the door can also now ask, why? The journey away from the caregiver and back again is mirrored by the journey of a thought, formed inside and then sent out into the world through words. Is this mere correlation, or are we witnessing the reactivation of a deep, encoded link between locomotion and articulation, a fundamental rhythm of human becoming? Yet, nature, in its boundless creativity, offers a counterpoint. The world is full of bipeds who walk in silence. The kangaroo, with its powerful hind legs, propels itself across the outback without a whisper of poetry. The ostrich strides across the plains, its thoughts, if any, unspoken. And birds, the most prolific of the 2-legged creatures, though they sing and call, have not built a language of infinite creativity, of past and future tense, of metaphor and myth. Their 2-leggedness is a marvel of evolution, but it did not unlock the same door. So, does this shatter the theory? Does it suggest that the link between walking and talking is a human-centric fantasy, a story we tell ourselves to connect the dots of our own uniqueness? Perhaps not. Perhaps it simply refines the question. The human journey to bipedalism was not an isolated adaptation, but the catalyst for a whole cascade of changes. It reshaped our pelvis, which in turn dictated the terms of human birth, leading to infants born remarkably premature by animal standards and thus requiring intense, prolonged social care. This extended childhood demanded new levels of communication, cooperation, and teaching. Our bipedalism freed our hands not just for gesture, but for tool-making, which further fueled cognitive growth and the need to explain complex processes. In us, the step was not just a mode of transport. It was the first domino in a chain reaction that reshaped our bodies, our societies, and our minds. The kangaroo hops, the bird, flies, but they did not embark on the same transformative spiral. Their world did not demand it. Ours did. So, we are left with a tentative observation, a single slice of a much larger truth. The connection is likely not one of simple cause and effect, but of profound synergy. Walking upright may not have created language. but it may have built the stage upon which language could make its entrance. It provided the neurological foundation, the social necessity, and the cognitive capacity. One allowed us to cross vast distances, to explore new horizons, to carry tools and food. The other allowed us to cross the vast distances between minds, to explore the horizons of shared ideas, to carry knowledge and stories. They are the twin engines of our exploration, one physical, one metaphysical. Both began the moment we stood up and looked at the horizon and wondered what and who might be out there. But this liberation of the upper body, this vertical ambition, came with a bill that would arrive millions of years later. For every engineering marvel, there is a trade-off, a structural compromise written into the very bones of the design. If standing up was the first step toward everything we are, what was the price of that first fateful step? What aches are written into our skeleton, a constant, low-frequency reminder of that ancient choice? We all know the ache. That dull, persistent throb in the small of the back after a long day hunched over a desk. The sharp, electric protest of a knee when descending a staircase. It is a universal language of discomfort, a common ground shared by the young athlete and the elderly gardener alike. We accept it as a part of life, perhaps even a harbinger of age. But what if this pain is not a simple malfunction, not just a sign of wear and tear? What if it is an echo from a distant past, a whispered argument between the bodies we inherited and the world we built? Is the pain in our backs and knees the price we paid to stand tall and see the horizon? Or is it the bill coming due for a modern life that has quietly betrayed our ancient design? To walk upright is to defy gravity in a uniquely precarious way. It is an engineering marvel, a balancing act of bone, muscle, and ligament that hoists our entire weight onto a narrow base. Our spine, that central pillar of our being, is a testament to evolutionary compromise. It is not a single, solid rod, but a graceful stack of vertebrae, separated by soft, gelatinous discs that act as shock absorbers. This structure granted us immense freedom, the ability to twist, to bend, to reach. But it came with a vulnerability. These discs, under constant vertical pressure, can bulge, they can herniate. The intricate muscles of the back, forced into a perpetual tug-of-war to keep us from toppling forward, can knot and spasm with fatigue. The knee, a magnificent and complex hinge, bears the brunt of every step, every jump, every impact. Its ligaments, the tough cords that bind it together, are like the ropes stabilizing a mast. They are strong, but they can be frayed by sudden twists or the relentless strain of carrying a load they were not perfectly designed for. Our bodies were not crafted for eternity, but for sufficiency, for enough strength and resilience to survive, to reproduce, and to pass these very genes along. The blueprint is magnificent, but it has its flaws, its trade-offs written in the language of anatomy. If we could exhume the ancestors, what would their bones tell us? The fossilized remains of Homo erectus, who walked the earth over 1 million years ago, offer tantalizing clues. Their skeletons show evidence of robust muscles and strong bones. But the signs of the degenerative diseases that plague us, the severe arthritis, the disc compression, are curiously less common. Their lives were undoubtedly harder, shorter, and more brutal. But their bodies were used as intended. They were in constant motion, walking, running, climbing, squatting. Their varied physical repertoire kept their supporting muscles strong, their joints lubricated by movement and nourished by a life that demanded a full, dynamic range of motion. They rested on the ground, not in chairs that cradle and ultimately weaken. Their world was soft underfoot. Dirt, grass, sand. A natural cushion for every step. They did not live long enough for the slow, cumulative whispers of decay to become a roaring chorus of pain. Their skeletons suggest a body in harmony with its purpose, a tool used daily for the exact functions it evolved to perform. The wear they exhibit is often the wear of action, of survival, not the wear of stillness and neglect. Then, we built a world. We paved the earth with unyielding concrete and asphalt. We invented the chair and devised a society where the pinnacle of productivity often involves sitting perfectly still for 8 hours a day, our hips flexed and our spine canted into a C shape. We lift heavy objects from the worst possible angle, bending at the waist instead of the knees, leveraging our fragile backs like a crane rather than the integrated system of levers they are. We strap our feet into shoes that elevate our heels, tilt our pelvis and alter our natural gait, transferring stress up the chain to our knees and hips. We sleep on surfaces that are either too soft or too hard, failing to support the spine's gentle curve through the night. We have, in essence, taken a body designed for varied, dynamic movement and placed it in a museum case of our own making. We ask it to hold a single, static position for hours on end. We ask it to absorb the shock of hard surfaces with every step. We ask it to carry loads it was not perfectly balanced to bear. We stand on 2 legs, yet we live as if we have forgotten how to use them. The modern world does not create the flaws in our evolutionary design. It finds them, exploits them, and amplifies them into a constant, aching complaint. But is it fair to lay all the blame at the feet of our ancestors or our architecture? Perhaps the fault lies not in our stars, nor in our spines, but in ourselves. This is the counter-argument. Our pain is not an inevitable evolutionary tax, but a cultural consequence. Our bodies, while imperfect, are capable of remarkable adaptation and resilience. The true culprit may be our profound sedentariness. Muscles that are not used atrophy. They forget how to support the skeleton. Ligaments become stiff, joints grow dry. We have divorced movement from daily life, and our bodies are paying the alimony. Couple this with diets that fuel inflammation and promote obesity, and the equation tilts further toward disaster. Every extra kilogram is a weight that our joints must carry, a constant pressure on those vulnerable discs. And then, there is our longevity. We now live decades longer than the bodies that evolved on the savannah were ever expected to last. We are asking a model designed for a 30-year warranty to last for 80. The wear and tear is not a design flaw so much as it is a testament to how far we have stretched the original operating parameters. The pain is not a ghost of evolution past, but the very real specter of modern choices. So where does this leave us, caught between the ancient and the contemporary, between the design and the reality? The ache in our back, the twinge in our knee. It is likely a conversation between all these things. It is the whisper of an ancestral trade-off meeting, the shout of modern convenience. It is the voice of a body that expects to be used, to be challenged, to move across varied terrain, crying out in protest against a life of repetitive stillness and hard, flat surfaces. It forces us to acknowledge that we are a hybrid species, living with Stone Age hardware in a Space Age world. The question is not whether our evolution failed us, or whether our modernity is betraying us. The deeper, more personal question lingers, unspoken with every wince and every groan. In our relentless pursuit of comfort and convenience, have we accidentally built a cage for the body that was built to roam free? And if our upright stature gifted us the vision to see beyond the next meal, to dream and to build this complex world, does the pain we sometimes feel remind us of a simpler, more physically honest existence we have left behind? This internal dissonance, this conflict between the body we have and the life we lead, inevitably pulls our gaze to another profound and often painful hallmark of the human experience. If walking upright came with its own set of trade-offs, what of the other defining miracle of our species? What of birth? Why is it that humanity, for all its intelligence and dominion, brings new life into the world through a passage that is so notoriously and often tragically difficult? Why do we struggle where other mammals so often seem to proceed with a primal, uncomplicated grace? Of all the mammals that walk the earth, from the tiniest shrew to the mightiest elephant, none experience birth as we do. For most, it is a swift, solitary, and instinctual process. A mother cat finds a quiet corner and with a series of purposeful contractions delivers her litter. A giraffe drops her calf onto the savanna from a startling height. The newborns tumble onto the hard ground, a shocking but vital catalyst for its first breath. The ordeal is often over in moments. The mother cleaning her young and preparing to move on, the circle of life turning with a quiet, brutal efficiency. Human birth defies this simplicity. It is a marathon of pain, a biological crisis that has, for millennia, balanced on a knife's edge between life and death. The human infant must perform a complex, spiraling dance through a bony gateway that seems almost designed to hinder its passage. The mother endures pain of an intensity and duration that is unique to our species, a trial that has historically claimed countless lives. This singular difficulty, this profound vulnerability at the very moment we create new life, might all trace back to a single, defining characteristic that set our ancestors on an extraordinary path: the act of standing up. Our bipedal gait, the very thing that freed our hands and lifted our gaze to the horizon, may have irrevocably complicated the most fundamental of mammalian acts. The story is written in the architecture of our bones, a permanent compromise etched into our skeletons. To walk upright is an engineering marvel. It requires a pelvis reshaped from its ancient quadrupedal design into a sturdy, bowl-like cradle that can support the weight of our torso and keep our center of gravity balanced over our feet. This new pelvis is narrower, its bones twisted and curved into a form that is perfect for locomotion but problematic for parturition. The birth canal is no longer a straightforward, open passage. It becomes a twisted tunnel, a journey with two sharp turns where the infant must navigate a tight fit. The head must enter one way, then rotate nearly 90 degrees to squeeze through the narrowest point, the shoulders following in a specific sequence. This is not a simple exit. It is a precise anatomical negotiation. This difficult passage is further complicated by another of our great evolutionary triumphs, our enormous brain. The human brain is our crown jewel, the engine of our consciousness, but it comes with a staggering biological cost. To achieve its full, magnificent complexity, it must grow to a size that is almost impossible to deliver through that remodeled bipedal pelvis. Evolution, that relentless and pragmatic tinkerer, arrived at a solution that is as ingenious as it is dangerous. It is known as the obstetric dilemma. Human babies are born neurologically premature and utterly helpless because they must be. If they stayed in the womb any longer, their heads would grow too large to pass through the birth canal. They are, in a very real sense, ejected into the world as external fetuses, their brains still rapidly developing outside the womb. What we gain in cognitive potential, we pay for in a birth process that is a breathtakingly narrow escape. It is an evolutionary tightrope walk, a just good enough solution where the survival of both mother and child hinges on a precarious balance between brain size and pelvic width. The miracle of human birth is not that it is easy, but that it is possible at all. This inherent biological vulnerability did not simply condemn us to solitary suffering. Instead, it may have been the crucible in which a fundamental aspect of our humanity was forged: the need for help. The fossil record offers tantalizing clues. The study of ancient bones, of pelvic fossils and the wear patterns on teeth, suggests that for early hominins like Homo erectus, birth was likely already a difficult and dangerous affair. An individual in the throes of labor, weakened and incapacitated by pain, would have been easy prey. She could not simply wander off, deliver her child alone, and quickly rejoin the group. She needed protection. She needed assistance. This primal necessity may have given birth to the first midwives, to the concept of community care surrounding birth. The act of helping another through this trial requires foresight, empathy, and a shared understanding of a future outcome, the survival of the mother and the child. It requires a social contract. The difficulty of birth, therefore, may have been a powerful evolutionary pressure selecting for cooperation, compassion, and collective intelligence. Our weakness became the foundation of our strength. This ancient legacy of assisted birth is woven into the very fabric of modern human society. Today, in sterile hospital rooms and cozy birth centers, we see the culmination of this deep-seated need. The doctor, the midwife, the doula. These are not modern inventions, but the cultural manifestations of an ancient imperative. We have formalized, medicalized, and technologically augmented the moral assistance our species has likely required for millions of years. The presence of a supportive community has been replaced by fetal heart monitors and epidurals, but the underlying principle remains unchanged. Human birth is too risky to face alone. Our culture has built entire institutions around this biological fragility, reflecting a profound dependence on each other to navigate a peril that is uniquely our own. Yet, is the story so simple? To lay the blame entirely at the feet of our upright posture is a compelling narrative, but evolution rarely deals in single causes. Perhaps the difficulty is not the fault of the bipedal pelvis alone, but the inevitable price tag for the brain it carries. The same narrow pelvis that makes birth a trial is also what allows us to walk, to run, to carry tools, and to explore. And the large brain that is so hard to deliver is the very instrument that allows us to mitigate the danger it creates, to develop medicine, to practice surgery, to offer comfort and support. The pain of childbirth is not merely an obstacle, it is the other side of the coin of human consciousness. It is the cost of admission for a mind capable of contemplating its own origin, of telling this very story, of feeling love and fear in equal measure for the new life struggling into the world. Is the trauma of birth, then, the necessary shadow cast by the brilliant light of human thought? So we are left with a paradox, a biological equation of trade-offs that defines our existence. Our upright stature gave us the world. It lifted us from the forest floor and set us on a path that would eventually lead us to the stars. It freed our hands to build and to create, to hold and to comfort. But that same adaptation also bent the most natural of processes into a trial of survival, anchoring us to our own vulnerability. The same legs that allow us to walk away also force us to need each other desperately. The profound pain of human birth is a perpetual reminder, a biological echo from our deepest past. It whispers that our greatest strength and our most profound weakness are one and the same, that the very thing that made us lords of the earth also made us more fragile, more interdependent, more human than any other creature. We stand tall, but we are born of a struggle. And if this is the price we pay for walking upright, one must wonder, what hidden costs are written into the skeleton of every other choice evolution has made? What other profound vulnerabilities are hidden within our greatest triumphs? This leads us to the next, deeper layer of the inquiry, to a question that is even more fundamental than how we give birth. Why did we start walking this way in the first place? What ancient pressure on a distant ancestor could have been so powerful, so compelling, that it reshaped our entire bodies and set in motion a chain of consequences that would forever alter the nature of birth, society, and consciousness itself? Why? Of all the creatures on this planet, are we the only ones destined to spend our entire lives looking at the world from this singular vertical perspective? Birds do it. Apes manage it for a short while, a fleeting moment of elevated perspective. But only one creature on Earth has chosen to live its entire life in a state of perpetual ascent, its body a tower against the horizon. We are the walkers, the standers. From our first wobbling steps to our final steady gaze, our existence is framed by this vertical journey. Why? What singular pressure, what twist of fate compelled our ancestors to abandon the security of all fours and embark on this precarious, upright adventure? The answer is not a single event, but a slow, unfolding drama written in bone, sediment, and the very fabric of our societies. To understand this choice, we must first read the story written in our own skeletons. Our bodies are not simply adapted for bipedalism, they are monuments to it, every curve and angle a testament to an evolutionary obsession. The human pelvis is a broad, bowl-shaped cradle, sculpted to cup our vital organs and provide a stable platform for the muscles that keep us balanced on two narrow points of contact. It is a stark contrast to the elongated, slender pelvis of a chimpanzee, built for power and flexibility in a crouched gait. Our spine curves in a gentle, sinuous S, a shock-absorbing spring that translates the jolting impact of each step into a smooth, efficient wave of motion, and the foramen magnum, the great hole at the skull's base where the spinal cord enters, sits directly beneath us, allowing our head to balance neatly atop our column-like neck, our eyes fixed on the world ahead. In a quadruped, this opening is at the back, the head perpetually thrust forward, its world a narrow lane of dirt and leaves. Our architecture is one of panoramic vision and enduring stability. These are not minor tweaks. They are fundamental redesigns. Could such a profound blueprint be the result of anything less than a relentless, multi-million-year pressure? The fossil record is our time machine, and it offers a grainy, fragmented film of this great awakening. It does not show a sudden leap to our feet, but a slow, agonizingly patient ballet of adaptation. Meet Australopithecus, like the famous Lucy, whose bones whisper of a dual existence. Her knee and pelvis show clear signs of walking upright, a creature comfortable on two legs, yet her long, curved fingers and ape-like shoulders suggest a life still intimately tied to the trees, a being caught between two worlds, two ways of being. She was a part-time walker, a cautious experiment in a new form of locomotion. Then came Homo erectus, the true pioneer. Their fossils tell a story of commitment. With a body almost modern in proportion, shorter arms, longer legs, a fully optimized pelvis, they strode out of Africa and across the continents. They were no longer dabbling in uprightness, they were its masters. Their gait was not a clumsy shuffle, but an efficient, distance-covering stride that allowed them to track prey across the savannah, to carry tools, and food to see over the tall grasses. This was the moment the experiment became a destiny. The journey from Lucy's tentative steps to the confident stride of Homo erectus spans millions of years. It was a slow burn that forged a new kind of animal. What kept this pressure on, generation after generation, until the job was done? The story, however, escapes the confines of biology and archaeology to weave itself into the very core of what we have become. Upright posture is not merely how we move, it is who we are. Our language is saturated with the metaphor of stance. We stand up for what we believe in. We take a stand against injustice. We are upstanding citizens. We feel dejected, thrown down, or we walk with our heads held high. This is no linguistic coincidence. The posture of power, of confidence, of moral clarity is the posture of bipedalism. To stand tall is to face the world openly, to expose the vulnerable front of our bodies in a gesture of astonishing courage and honesty. It is a physical declaration of self-possession. The philosopher's contemplative pace, the scientist's observant stance, the warrior's ready posture, all are variations on the same theme. Our bipedal body became the canvas upon which we painted our concepts of virtue, authority, and enlightenment. Did our morality begin not in our minds, but in the alignment of our spines? Yet, this magnificent tale begs a powerful counter-question. If it is so advantageous, so deeply woven into our success, why are we alone? Why did no other species embark on this same path? The answer may lie not in the superiority of the design, but in its terrifying cost. Bipedalism is a Faustian bargain. Our specialized pelvis, that perfect cradle for upright walking, is also a narrow, constricted birth canal, making human childbirth uniquely dangerous and painful compared to that of other mammals. Our vertical column, for all its graceful engineering, is a notorious failure, a fragile stack of vertebrae prone to slipped discs, sciatica, and chronic back pain. The price we pay for trading stability for height. And in that moment of standing, we surrendered the explosive speed of the quadruped, the ability to flee into the trees with instant four-limbed power. We exchanged raw, primal safety for a vulnerable panoramic view. So perhaps the question is not why others didn't choose to stand, but why we were forced to. Their environments may never have presented a challenge so desperate that such a costly anatomical revolution was the only answer. What unique crucible of scarcity and opportunity did we find ourselves in that made this gamble worth taking? Perhaps then we did not choose the upright life at all. Perhaps we were pushed. The climate was shifting, the dense forests of Africa receding, giving way to vast expanses of open savanna. In this new world, the ability to see over the grass to spot predators and prey, to travel efficiently over long distances between scattered food sources, to free the hands for carrying precious resources back to a home base. These small advantages, accumulated over millennia, may have provided just enough edge for survival. The first hominid to stand for a longer moment gained a fleeting advantage, and that was all it took. We were coerced by a changing world into this new, precarious stance, and once we were upright, we could not go back. We had to build a culture around it. We had to invent tools to compensate for our lack of claws, create social bonds to protect our vulnerable young during their long development, and eventually use our freed hands to gesture, to craft, to write. Our entire civilization, our art, our technology, our societies, rests on the foundation of that forced posture. And so we are left standing here, the sole perpetual pilgrims of the vertical world, our bodies a living archive of an ancient struggle. We walk with the ghost of Lucy in our hips and the ambition of Homo erectus in our stride. Our posture is our history, our burden, and our triumph. But if this physical revolution shaped our bodies and our cultures, did it also shape the very instrument that contemplates it? Did the world we saw from this new height, and the hands we freed in the process, force our brains to grow in a new direction? Could it be that standing up was the first, necessary step toward truly seeing each other, toward building a shared mind?